Alright, here's how these reviews are going to work. I'm going to go over a synopsis of the episode and then tell you where I think it either shines or fails. Then when we get to the end, I'll tell you my overall thoughts of the episode and give it a final ranking. Sound simple enough? Good. Then let's get started. This episode starts out with an opening narration telling us that long ago there were two alicorn siblings who ruled the kingdom of Equestria. The older ruled the sun and the day, the younger ruled the night and the moon. The pony slept through the night, essentially pissing off the younger sibling and turning her evil. So the older alicorn used some MacGuffins called the Elements of Harmony to banish her and the moon. Then we cut to our main character, Twilight Sparkle, who believes that this nightmare moon is coming back. She tries to tell her mentor, Princess Celestia, who doesn't believe her. I trust you completely, except that you're crazy. Now go to some out-of-the-way town and make some friends. And of course, Twilight does that, except that she plans on blowing off the whole idea of making friends and just prepare for the return of Nightmare Moon, who is definitely not coming back. At least Twilight doesn't blow off her other order to check on the Summer Sun celebration's preparations, so she can meet the other members of our cast, Southerner Applejack, brash and bold Rainbow Dash, the fashionista Rarity, the shy and timid Fluttershy, and the off-the-wall Pinkie Pie. Each of them try to be Twilight's friend, she doesn't want to be friends with them, and she runs off each time. I would go into more detail, but these episodes don't. There is no other details given about them in this particular episode, except Rainbow Dash wants to be a Wonderbolt. The next day, they wake up before the sun rises for their celebration and get ready for the party. And guess what? Nightmare Moon is back! Who'd have guessed? And she's preventing the sun from rising. Somehow. And part 1 ends on a cliffhanger. Part 2 is where we start getting problems. All the main 6 go to the library where Pinkie Pie finds a book that tells them that the MacGuffins needed to defeat Nightmare Moon are in the ruins of the ancient Alicorn sisters, which requires them to go through the Everfree Forest, conveniently just outside of Ponyville. Along the way, Nightmare Moon's magic pits each of the ponies against a certain trial. First, Nightmare Moon causes a cliff to break and sends Applejack and Twilight hurtling over. Thankfully, in the nick of time, Applejack catches Twilight from falling off, and then this happens.
What do I do? Let go.
Why?
Here, what I'm saying to you is the honest truth. Let go, and you'll be safe.
Did a line of dialogue get cut or something? Applejack never gives Twilight any reason to let go. Like, some pony will catch you! And then Twilight lets go. Isn't she supposed to be the smart one? Anyway, the Pegasi catch Twilight, and apparently this proves Applejack's honesty, somehow. Applejack, a command can never be truth or deceit, and telling someone to essentially risk death without explaining why has nothing to do with honesty whatsoever. The next trial is a manticore. A couple of the ponies attack it and fail. Fluttershy walks up to it, is nearly gored, and removes a thorn in its paw. Apparently Nightmare Moon used her magic to create this thorn. Besides the scenario being cliched, I don't really have a problem with it, although it gets a little cringe-inducingly cutesy. Next we come to some demonic trees, and Pinkie Pie starts singing. I'm going to say this right now. Songs do not factor into my final ranking of the episode, but I will judge the songs when we get to them. I really like the song, it's pretty catchy, the only thing that kills it for me is the song talking at the end. I hate it when singers do that. As for the actual trial, the laughter makes the trees turn back to normal. And I must ask why. Is laughter the antithesis to Nightmare Moon's powers? Did the demon trees have crippling self-esteem issues? Never explained. Also, how the hell were trees ever threatening? Next, the main 6 come to a river filled with a current, caused by a dragon who is crying because he had half of his mustache cut off. Rarity slices her tail to replace the mustache. The only thing that actually makes this scene bearable is Rainbow making fun of it. And I'm forced to wonder, couldn't the Pegasi carry the others over? Did they forget what happened like 10 minutes ago? The final trial is a downed bridge. Rainbow Dash flies across it and is tempted by creatures called the Shadow Bolts, who tell her that they will give her the opportunity to be one of the fastest flyers in the Everfree Forest, which is kinda like giving someone the opportunity to be one of the best athletes in the Gobi Desert. How does this temptation make sense? At all. They just ask her to abandon her friends and never give a reason for it. Rainbow doesn't even ask for a reason. She just tells them to piss off. Seriously, is there a director's cut to this episode? Finally, they get to the temple and find the Elements of Harmony. Twilight tries to figure out the riddle about them, and the other main 5 leave, giving Nightmare Moon the opportunity she needs to arrive. Then we have an actually thrilling fight sequence, which results in Nightmare Moon destroying the Elements of Harmony. When Twilight hears the voices of the other main 5, she realizes that not only do they represent the Elements of Harmony, honesty, kindness, laughter, generosity, loyalty, and magic, because you know that your group of friends isn't complete without a good magician, but that they are also her friends. Yaw. They use the Elements of Harmony and turn Nightmare Moon back into Princess Luna, the sister of Princess Celestia, the 2 Alicorn sisters in the book from the beginning of the 2-parter. And now I have another question. If the elements of harmony could change Nightmare Moon back into Princess Luna, why'd you send her into the moon 1,000 years ago? Wow, Celestia, you are an asshole! Speaking of Celestia, she comes back in and reveals that she knew that Nightmare Moon was coming back, and that's why Celestia told Twilight to make friends. Also, now that Twilight has friends, Celestia lets her live in Ponyville and presumably sends her a stipend so she can learn the lessons of friendship. And that was the two-part series premiere. Do you see why I didn't recommend them in my review of the show? Now for the final ranking. There are generally 4 rankings I can give an episode. I'll give it a gold ranking if it's a great episode, a silver ranking if it's a good episode, a bronze ranking if it's an okay episode, or I'll give it nothing at all if it's anything less. Why? Because either an episode is good or it's not. Both Boast Busters and The Mysterious Ne'er-Do-Well are bad episodes. But if I told you Boast Busters was worse, would it really compel you to watch Ne'er-Do-Well? Conversely, there is a reason to tell which good episodes are better than others, so we know what is done right and what is done wrong. So, what did the two-part series premiere get? I'm gonna be honest, these episodes are extremely hard to critique. Both of the parts not only have different feel, but different quality. The first part properly introduces us to each of the characters, sets up a villain, but suffers from a little bit too much predictability, and the characters seem like flanderized versions of themselves, though I realize that they have to be. The second episode feels like a butchered movie, since several vital lines of dialogue are apparently missing, leaving some very awkward implications. It all comes off as incredibly rushed, but there is a reason for that. Apparently Friendship is Magic was supposed to have an overarching arc, so each of these trials would have been a full episode, where each of the main 6 provided their particular element of harmony, and got developed a little bit more. Unfortunately, I cannot critique intentions, only the finished product. The first episode definitely feels like silver quality. The second episode is so incredibly butchered that it comes off as awkward and rushed, only saved by the climax. Since I have to give two-parters the same ranking, I have to ask if the first part can carry the second part. Unfortunately, the first episode doesn't give us enough insight to these characters for us to really care. Average it out, and the Friendship is Magic two-parter gets bronze. It's okay, not bad, but I'm probably not going to watch it anytime soon. And there are plenty of better episodes to introduce someone to the series, like Dragonshy, Party of One, or the Season 2 premiere.
Oh, girls, don't you see? When I was a little filly and the sun was going down.
Tell me she's not.
The darkness and the shadows, they would always make me frown.
She is.
I'd hide under my pillow from what I thought I saw. But Grammy Pie said that wasn't the way to deal with fears at all.
Then what is?
She said, Pinkie, you gotta stand up tall. Learn to face your fears.
Hold on! I'm a-coming! Applejack, what do I do? Let go.
Are you crazy?
No, I ain't. I promise you'll be safe.
That's not true.
No.
What do you know? Haven't you heard of suspension of disbelief?
This episode starts off with Twilight helping Applejack win a bet against her brother Big Macintosh.
He's gonna walk down Stirrup Street in one of Granny's girdles.
That's disturbing. They're interrupted by Spike receiving a letter from Celestia where she receives 2 tickets to the Grand Galloping Gala. And here's the most obvious problem with the episode. Celestia knows full well that Twilight has 5 friends, and yet she only sends 2 tickets. You're still an asshole. Unless it's for Twilight's cult friend or something. Are you trying to suggest something? Applejack suggests that she wants to go to the gala to sell some baked goods to make money. A very odd reason to go to a party.
I'd give my left hind leg to go to that gala.
I wouldn't tell that to Pinkie if I were you. Twilight offers her spare ticket to Applejack, and then Rainbow crashes in. She wants to crash the performance of the Wonderbolts and one-up them. She obviously hasn't thought her plan through. Rainbow's fantasy is dashed by Applejack biting her tail. And I must ask, does it taste good? In at least 5 episodes, Applejack is biting on Rainbow's tail, and she never seems reluctant to do it. Nevertheless, the 2 of them hoof wrestle for the ticket, but Twilight dismisses that, saying that she'll decide who gets the ticket based on who has the best reason to go. Of course, according to Twilight, they're both good reasons. So, she decides not to make a decision and goes to get some lunch. Along the way, Pinkie jumps out of her front door and crashes into Twilight. She sees the ticket and wants to go simply because it's a party. Then we come to this episode's song. I don't like this one. It's way too repetitive in not just lyrics, but in melody as well.
Best place for me. Oh, the Grand Galloping Gala is the best place for me. Hip, hip, hooray. It's the best place for me, for Pinkie. The Grand Galloping Gala is the best place for me. Oh, the Grand Galloping Gala is the best place for me.
But for me, the worst part of this scene is that Pinkie flat out assumes that Twilight is going to give the ticket to her. Rarity stumbles along and sees the ticket and wants to meet some prince that nobody really cares about. She wants to marry him and become a princess. Okay, come on. This show would never make one of its main characters a princess. That is utterly ridiculous. Then we're introduced to Scrappy number 1, Angel Bunny. Nobody likes Angel, and I'll get to why in a later episode. He steals the ticket and gives it to Fluttershy because, I don't know, the two of them run a pickpocketing ring. Fluttershy sees the ticket and, of course, wants to go to the Grand Galloping Gala as well. She wants to see some unique and exotic animals. Meanwhile, Twilight tells everyone that she doesn't know who's going to go with her, which really upsets Pinkie. We find out that Rainbow Dash and Applejack were trying to make sure that Twilight wasn't giving the ticket away. Then Rainbow and Applejack start fighting. Pinkie joins in, then so do Fluttershy and Rarity. Can I hear that theme song again?
Do you know you are my very best friends?
Yeah, it's weird. For a show about friendship, we spend the first real episode watching our main characters fight. And fight. And fight. And segue.
I said, oatmeal, are you crazy?
That's the biggest laugh that this episode got from me. Finally, Twilight disperses the argument and tells them that she'll think about it. Then she returns to her quest for lunch. The waiter asks if she's made her decision, and Twilight flips out. I will admit that Twilight's outburst is pretty funny too. Oh, and this is the first episode that mentions that Spike eats gemstones. Then comes the favors. Each of the other main 5 start to provide Twilight with favors to get the ticket. Rainbow Dash kicks a hole through the clouds to stop Twilight from getting wet. Rarity provides Twilight with a makeover. Applejack provides Twilight with food. Fluttershy tries cleaning up Twilight's house, and Pinkie throws a mini-party. None of them are subtle about it, and Pinkie's favor lets the knowledge of the ticket out to the entire town, who now all want to go with Twilight. That must be some party, since I'm pretty sure that none of them know who Twilight is. Benny Hill-style montage, Twilight gets cornered and teleports to her library, and for some reason it's suddenly nighttime now. The other main 5 are all smiling expectantly. Twilight admits that she can't decide, and all the other main 5 at least look guilty for what they did. And all of them apologize for wanting the ticket, except Rainbow Dash.
Yes! That means the ticket is mine! I got the ticket! I got the ticket! You know, I haven't perfected my signature moves for the Wonderbolts anyway.
Twilight decides that she doesn't want to go to the gala either and sends the tickets back. They kiss and make up, making Spike cringe. Applejack says this.
With her, Spike. Isn't that just like a boy? Can't handle the least bit of sentiment.
Congratulations, Applejack. I've got an opinion of you now. Princess Celestia sends back 6 tickets and asks why Twilight didn't say so in the first place. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, and she sends one for Spike. That was the Ticketmaster, and I didn't like it too much. Why? The plot is contrived and predictable. The humor was subtle, and most of the characters act reprehensible. I wouldn't go as far to say that it's bad, it's just really, really lacking. Maybe you could have had one of the characters act genuinely kind, and the other characters go after that one thinking that she's trying to get the ticket, but in the end they all learn the error of their ways and we come to the same conclusion. I'm not sure exactly how you'd make this episode funnier. Actually, I do. I watched one video where one scene was given sitcom sound effects, and it was hilarious. So, can someone get on doing that for the whole episode? Also, Benny Hill only works when you speed up the footage. For me, though, the best thing about this episode is that it gets the ball rolling for a couple of better episodes down the line. As it is, the Ticketmaster falls just short from getting any sort of reward from me.
You get nothing. You lose. Good day, sir.
This episode starts out with Applejack and Big Mac talking. Apparently Big Mac hurt himself, so Applejack takes it upon herself to harvest the whole orchard all by herself, because apparently it's Applebuck season, where the Apple family takes it upon themselves to harvest their entire crop. No, I don't know what makes it Applebuck season, since Applejack is harvesting apples in pretty much every single episode. Meanwhile, there's a stampede of raging cattle charging straight for Ponyville. Luckily, Applejack hears it and comes to save the day, steering the cattle away from the town. And for some reason, the cows can talk.
Oh my! Begging your pardon, Applejack, but Muriella here saw one of those nasty snakes.
The whole town decides to throw Applejack a party for her heroism, which for some reason takes a week to set up. And yes, it is a week. It was mentioned in passing. A continuous problem with this show is that they don't know how to use transitions. Seriously, as far as I can tell, Lesson 0 is the only episode that uses them. Also, no one has seen Applejack, the guest of honor, all week. Then again, this is Applejack we're talking about. She could be right behind me, and I'd probably never notice. At this party, Twilight tries to give a speech, but is repeatedly interrupted by Rainbow Dash, Pinkie Pie, and Fluttershy, telling everyone how helpful that Applejack is, and how she's going to help them with some specific task later in the episode. Speaking of Applejack, she arrives late to the party and is looking noticeably...
I sure do look funny.
Or not so noticeably, since only Twilight is the one to detect the change in Applejack's demeanor. By the way, I love this scene. And then she awkwardly drags her trophy home. Twilight decides to check up on Applejack and for some reason starts teleporting every 10 feet. I don't know exactly your limits, Twilight, but I'm pretty sure that that's a waste of magic. Twilight learns that Applejack is harvesting the field all alone since Big Mac hurt himself, and that Applejack is way too stubborn to accept help. Which is weird since the last episode started with Twilight helping Applejack. You know what, I'm gonna chalk that up to the sleep deprivation. We cut to Rainbow Dash. She wants Applejack to help launch her into the air off of a catapult. This is going to be fun. Crash, crash, angry face. Rainbow gets launched to the moon. Or to Twilight's house. That alerts Twilight to try to get Applejack to accept some help once again. It's pretty much the same thing. Twilight tries to get through Applejack's pride and she fails. The only thing that mixes it up is that Applejack hits her head and can barely hear anything. So they spend this conversation shouting. Now Applejack goes to help Pinkie Pie bake some muffins. Since Applejack is so out of it, she thinks that the recipe calls for soda, potato chips, lemon juice, and earthworms. And Pinkie Pie promised free samples to the whole town. This is gonna be a riot. Oh man, here it comes. That's not funny. That's not funny at all. For the third time, Twilight checks on Applejack, who is practically collapsing from exhaustion. Twilight tries to help Applejack says no, and this scene goes nowhere. The only difference is that Applejack is upside down. Oh, and ponies are apparently racist against mules. The last pony to need help in this episode is Fluttershy, because the writers didn't know what to do with Rarity yet. She needs help rounding up the rabbits to take a census. Long story short, Applejack and her dog Winona spook them and turn this episode into the Night of the Lepus.
The horror! The horror! It was awful!
A disaster! A horrible, horrible disaster!
Come on guys, it wasn't that bad. Also, I'm not sure if it's intentional, but some clips were reused from the stampede from the beginning of the episode. The rabbits pretty much destroy all of the gardens in town, prompting Twilight to check on Applejack one final time. Twilight tells Applejack she needs help, Applejack refuses, but this time, the twist is that she's actually finished one half of the orchard. Finally, she swallows her pride and accepts her friend's help. We learn that if someone offers you help, you should take it, or else something like this might happen. Applebuck season. Finally, a good episode. It's almost great, but there are a few things holding it back. Amy Keating-Rogers, the writer of this episode, kept the segments of Applejack screwing up fresh by having her screw up a different task each time. But the parts with Twilight are way too repetitive. Oh, and there's a way to do slapstick correctly, and a way to do it not so correctly. I don't want to see sick ponies. Maybe played for drama, but definitely not played for laughs. Otherwise, Applebuck season is solid. The humor that doesn't make me cringe is pretty good. There are plenty of good facial expressions from the characters. Everyone remembers Dash's
Gonna be so awesome!
face, and her angry face is pretty good too. So, Applebuck season gets a silver. Keep the sick ponies out of it, keep the other humor, you'll eventually get the gold.
Are you saying my mouth is making promises my legs can't keep?
Good night, everybody.
This episode starts out with Pinkie Pie talking about Rainbow Dash's impressive stunts until Rainbow flies overhead, and for some reason Rainbow finds Pinkie annoying. Rainbow is distracted and crashes into a mountain in a classic cartoon gag. We get an intro and then this episode begins again. Pinkie Pie is searching for Rainbow, and Rainbow is trying to get away. It's full of more classic cartoon gags. Yeah, this episode goes all out with the humor. Eventually Pinkie Pie catches up to Rainbow, and apparently wants Rainbow to help pull some pranks on their friends. And they surprisingly bond over it. The pranks seem to make varying degrees of sense. The miscolored apples just seem weird unless you've watched Family Appreciation Day. They stop at Fluttershy because according to Pinkie, she's way too sensitive for even their most harmless prank. And knowing Fluttershy, they're probably right. The next day, Pinkie is ready to do more pranking. However, when she gets to Rainbow's house, now available at Toys R Us for $19.95, she sees a Griffon. Her name is Gilda, and she's an old friend of Rainbow's. And she's Scrappy number 2. I suppose now is a good time as any to go over how I deal with Scrappies. Everyone who watches the show usually has at least one character they don't like Diamond Tiara, Angel Bunny, and sometimes even one of the main 6. If that's the case, they usually destroy an episode for the viewer. If the character is in character, I cannot count it as a criticism against the episode, unless they're a poorly written one-shot. Personally, I don't hate Gilda, but I don't like her either. Is there any character that I do hate? No, of course not. Gilda and Rainbow Dash perform something called the Junior Speedster Chant, which apparently counts as a song. Except it's not a song. At all.
Dash. Junior speedsters are our lives, skybound swords and daring dives. Junior speedsters, it's our quest to someday be the very best.
After that, Rainbow and Gilda fly off to catch up, leaving Pinkie a little down. Later, Pinkie goes back into stalker mode and chases after them using trampolines, balloons, and a Dr. Seuss-style flying mobile. All are destroyed by Gilda. Pinkie manages to get on Gilda's nerves, while Rainbow stays oblivious to the whole thing. And while I don't hate Gilda, she is a one-note bully, and her lingo is
That cloud up there is a gnarly dragon egg.
painful. She is holding this episode back. Pinkie goes to Twilight for advice, and Twilight suggests that Pinkie Pie is jealous. Pinkie gets understandably angry about it and barges out. But then she starts to consider the fact that she's actually wrong. That is pretty mature, and in my opinion one of the show's earliest shining moments. Pinkie tries to get her mind off things in what I presume to be the town square, where she sees Gilda start pulling pranks on unsuspecting townsponies. They're all intentionally cruel, and Pinkie Pie sees them all. She starts dealing with the cognitive dissonance of trying to believe that Gilda is good, and the fact that she's pulling these pranks. Wait, did I just use the words cognitive dissonance to describe something in a cartoon? Okay. The last straw is broken when Fluttershy runs into Gilda. Gilda does not take it well, and she roars at Fluttershy, causing her to run away crying. If you're wondering, this is why people hate Gilda. Pinkie Pie sees this and decides that it calls for extreme measures.
Measures, Pinkie Pie style.
Which happens to be a party. All of the main 6 are there, including Fluttershy. Yeah, I have no idea why Fluttershy is there either. Gilda just roared in her face, she visibly doesn't want to be there, and she furthers the plot in no way whatsoever. If she's coming just for Pinkie Pie, they must be closer than I thought. Gilda comes in and starts suffering from prank after prank after prank. Pinkie's lines during this scene are hilarious.
I'm watching you like a hawk.
Why? Can't you watch me like a griffin?
Gilda eventually snaps and starts seeing pranks where there aren't any. During Pin the Tail on the Pony, she flips out and makes a fool of herself in front of Rainbow Dash.
This is your idea of a good time? I've never met a lamer bunch of dweebs in all my life. And Pinkie Pie, you are Queen Lame-o with your weak little party pranks. Did you really think you could make me lose my cool? Well, Dash and I have 10 times as much cool as the rest of you put together.
Rainbow isn't amused.
You know, Gilda, I was the one who set up all those weak pranks at this party.
What?
Ooh. So I guess I'm Queen Lame-o.
Come on, Dash, you're joshing me.
They weren't all meant for you specifically. It was just dumb luck that you set them all off. And you sure didn't need any help making a fool of yourself. You know, this is not how I thought my old friends would treat my new friends. If being cool is all you care about, maybe you should go find some new cool friends someplace else.
Twilight apologizes, and we end on a lesson that false friends will reveal themselves in time. A moral that I am personally not entirely sold on. I don't know why people hate on this episode so much. Well, I do, but personally I find it quite underrated, because there's just so much humor to it, and there are a few shining moments. Rainbow's speech at the end is obvious, but there's also the fact that this episode brought up cognitive dissonance, which I still can't believe. And then there's the fact that we all knew that Pinkie was in the right, but she actually considered that she was wrong. That's something you don't see too often in most media. What holds this episode back is Gilda herself. Though I personally don't hate her, I will admit that she was written a one-note bully with a vocabulary of a 90s middle schooler. Griffon the Brush-Off gets a silver. If you give Dash's friend a little more personality, you just might get that gold. Wink, wink.
Why don't you make like a tree and get out of here?
Let's just get this over with. This episode starts out with Twilight practicing her magic in a joke that falls flat on its face. Spike and Twilight then decide to go on a stroll throughout the town, with Spike complimenting Twilight on her magical abilities. We learn that unicorns are only supposed to have a little bit of magic pertaining to their special talents, but Twilight's special talent is magic, because she is special. Introducing Scrappies 3 and 4, Snips and Snails. They're bragging about a new unicorn in town, and she's putting on a magic show in the town square. This happens to be the great and powerful Trixie. She starts embellishing her talents. You know, putting on a show. But Applejack, Rarity, and Rainbow don't take too kindly to it. They seem surprised that Trixie is showing off her talents. Almost like it's a show. Speaking of which, how would Trixie's magic show ever be impressive in a world where magic is common? Applejack, Rarity, and Rainbow start complaining that Trixie is showing off, and yes, they are acting incredibly immature. Here's a tip: if you don't like what you see, then just leave the show. The rest of the town seems to be interested in it. They don't leave. Instead, they try to one-up the show-off by being an even bigger show-off. And each of them gets a slice of humble pie. Why am I happy about this? Oh, and while Pinkie Pie and Fluttershy are in the audience, they only cameo in this episode. I guess Andrea Libman was out sick when this episode was made. Or maybe their scenes were cut for time. It probably would have made this episode make somewhat more sense. There's a subplot going on where Spike repeatedly tries to get Twilight to show up Trixie, and both of them come off as annoying. Spike for never shutting up, and Twilight for not doing anything. She's afraid her friends would turn on her like they did on Trixie, and I somewhat don't blame her since Trixie did practically nothing wrong. The annoyance comes from the fact that she has the ability to get Trixie to go away. No, I don't hate Trixie, but you can thank M.A. Larson for that. Now maybe you could do something with these two. That's something, I guess. As for this episode, they wait over Trixie hand and hoof. We learned earlier that Trixie banished an Ursa Major, so they start fawning over her. Enter Spike, who doesn't believe a word that Trixie said. He tells Tweedledee and Tweedledum that they shouldn't either, unless they actually see it with their own eyes. You see where this is going. They go into the Everfree Forest in the middle of the night because their parents want them dead like the rest of us, and they find what they think is an Ursa Major. To be fair, that is a pretty cool design. It chases them back into town. Have I told you how annoying their voices are? Tweedledee and Tweedledum wake up Trixie to have her vanquish the Ursa. This is why I don't hate Trixie. She actually tries to undo the mess that these two idiots made. And she fails. Then the Ursa starts rampaging throughout the town. Twilight finally does something and puts the beast to sleep in the first anticlimax of the series, a trend which still continues to this day. We learn later that it's actually an Ursa Minor, which is a really pointless twist when you think about it. Now our friends are impressed because Twilight doesn't embellish her talents.
Magic's got nothing to do with it. Trixie's just a loudmouth.
Oh my god, Rainbow, you are not one to talk.
Magic is a part of who you are, Sugar Cube, and we like who you are.
But magic is part of who Trixie is too. Speaking of which, Trixie runs off and these two boneheads get mustaches. Remember back when I said I found Boast Busters worse than Ne'er-Do-Well? I firmly believe that. Ne'er-Do-Well at least kept my attention. It took me 3 times to get through this episode, no joke. So yeah, it's bad. When I say bad, I mean bad for this show. It never gets anywhere near Splinter territory, but that doesn't mean I like it. Why is this a bad episode? I said that I don't hate Trixie. Well, that's because she looks like a saint next to our main characters. Not to mention next to these two. You never want to make the antagonist look better than the protagonist. Rainbow Dash has no business talking about someone else being a show-off. Applejack and Rarity would probably ignore Trixie. Speaking of that, if you didn't like the magic show, which still doesn't make any sense, why didn't you just leave? When people annoy me, I ignore them. I can't help but think that Pinkie Pie and Fluttershy had some role in this episode, but were cut for time or because Andrea Libman was sick or something. I doubt it could have saved this episode, but it probably would have made this episode a little bit more bearable. Chris Savino only wrote one other episode, and for good reason. To his credit, Stairmaster is much better in every regard. As for Boast Busters, it's an utter train wreck.
I have a very low tolerance level for stupid bullshit.
This episode starts out with Fluttershy feeding her animals. She comes to Angel Bunny, who is being his natural self, as in a total... They notice a cloud of black smoke, and Angel throws a carrot at Fluttershy because he's a bucking asshole. Fluttershy tries to warn everyone in town in only the way that Fluttershy can. Luckily, Twilight comes in and tells them what's going on. A dragon has fallen asleep on top of a nearby mountain, and that's causing the smoke. If no pony does anything, Equestria will be covered in smoke for 100 years. Which is odd, considering that there are other dragons in Equestria, and they all have to sleep at some point. The main 6 are instructed to encourage the dragon to leave in any way possible. All the main 6 are eager to take on the dragon, except Fluttershy, who is scared of her own shadow. They even show how ready they are in a pretty cool montage. Fluttershy, however, tries to convince Twilight to let her stay behind. But that's a no-go. Fluttershy is the most important member of the team for this mission, since she's able to communicate and take care of animals. So they begin their journey up the mountain. Or they would if Fluttershy wasn't so reluctant to get going. She tries to fly up, but her wings lock. So Applejack decides that she has to take Fluttershy around the mountain another way. Sometime later, after 31 games of tic-tac-toe to be precise, Applejack and Fluttershy join the others, and they continue their route up the mountain trail. They come to a chasm which must be jumped over, and as you might have guessed, Fluttershy is too afraid to make the jump. So Pinkie tries to encourage Fluttershy across. And no, this doesn't count as a song either. Don't look down, Fluttershy looks down, sight gag. The next obstacle is an avalanche zone. A leaf falls on Fluttershy and she sets one off. Yes, a leaf. Rocks fall and we get some pulse-pounding action. The main six are nearly crushed a few times. There's loads of suspense here. It ends with the path being covered by a load of dirt, which the main six now need to climb over. Fluttershy slips and the other main six keep getting annoyed with her, especially Rainbow. Finally, they get to the entrance of the cave where the dragon slumbers. We learn of Twilight's plan, which utilizes the ability of all of her friends. Rainbow is instructed to clear the air of smoke, Rarity and Pinkie are instructed to create a distraction, Applejack brought apples for ammunition, and Fluttershy is there to communicate with the dragon. But we learn that Fluttershy is afraid of dragons, specifically adult dragons, and only dragons, not manticores. And she actually has a pretty good justification for it. With Fluttershy unable to face her fears, the other main six try their best to take care of the dragon. Twilight tries talking to it, which doesn't work. Applejack blends into the background, which doesn't work. Rarity tries to flatter it, which doesn't work. Pinkie does something, which doesn't work. And Rainbow kicks it in the face, which pisses it off. The dragon starts to torment Fluttershy's friends, and when she sees this, she snaps.
Dare you! Listen here, mister. Just because you're big doesn't mean you get to be a bully. I repeat, you do not hurt my friend!
Yes, Fluttershy gets a badass moment, and it is awesome. She actually manages to talk it down and gets to fly off. The Pegasi clear the clouds, and everyone is happy. We end on a lesson that you should never lose faith in your friends. A pretty good moral. That was Dragonshy. This is the first great episode of the show. We get some really intense action and are kept in suspense the whole way through. There's some pretty decent humor scattered throughout, and we get some really good development for Fluttershy. If I'd have to lodge a complaint, and I do, it's that Fluttershy's timidness can come off as annoying if you aren't used to her character, but it's well worth the payoff at the end. Dragonshy gets my first gold ranking. This is a great episode, and I feel that the show has really hit its stride now. What episode's next? Look before you... Son of a... Don't you hate it when things never go as you plan? I wanted to stay as far away from that episode as possible. Unfortunately, the powers that be had other plans in mind. Looks like I gotta go back in the line of fire for a re-review. Needless to say, I didn't like this one too much. Why not? Everyone else loved it. They praised it to high heavens. Well, sit back and I'll tell you how it went. Grab a cold drink, cause we're gonna be here for a while. The episode started, poetically enough, with the sun being blocked by rain clouds. The Pegasus ponies had skipped a sprinkle and had scheduled a rainstorm for that night. Among the debris were Applejack and Rarity. I couldn't for the life of me figure out why Rarity was there. Applejack's story checked out. She was a farmer, good with manual labor, certainly an asset to the storm effort. Rarity was a pony of a different caliber. She was a designer, a fashionista as she calls it, some pony who spends most of her time indoors. Certainly there were better selections for the job. The two were at each other's throats immediately. Rarity wanted to place down branches back on the trees for reasons I can't tell you. Just proves my point. She was the wrong one for the job. The thunderous anger in their voice was enough to drive a man to madness.
Does not, does so infinity. Ha! Does not infinity plus one.
Truly the words of business owners. Perhaps they were meant to act childishly that day, but no responsible adult would ever lower themselves to such simplistic arguments. After a brief reprieve from the intro sequence, I come face to face with my old adversary, Charlotte Fullerton, the writer of this episode. I've recently made it known that she's my least favorite writer on the show, though I didn't know it at the time I first watched this episode. It was her first effort. We could expect that to fail. Little did I know that the problems that plague this episode plague all of her episodes. Her mark is unmistakable. In one of her episodes, a character or a conflict doesn't need to have a logical reason to be there. They're just there because she wills it. If there's an ending she wants, it'll happen whether or not she needs to bend the personality of the characters to make it happen. I couldn't believe that Rarity and Applejack were so enraged with each other. They shared no animosity, nary a conversation up to this point. Where did this hatred come from? Oh yeah, Charlotte Fullerton's ass. The two of them were spared solace from the storm by the call of an old friend, Twilight Sparkle. I'll tell you now, she had the reputation as the smartest unicorn in all of Ponyville. No, in all of Equestria. But if you saw her that night, you'd think I was crazy for telling you that. Rarity stopped Applejack from entering the library to wipe the mud off of her hooves. Perhaps she had a premonition and was trying to spare her friend from the misery that awaited them. Or perhaps she was just being a dick and trying to get under Applejack's skin. Rarity made one of the greatest mistakes of her life that night. She claimed that she would have difficulty getting home in the rain, and that Applejack would as well. Perhaps it was true, or perhaps Twilight had the ability to teleport not only herself, but others as well. Instead, she right the hell out of nowhere suggested the three of them have a slumber party. Whenever I bring up my hatred of this episode, people always think that this is my contention, that I can't take a slumber party themed episode. Well, it's true I find this episode dull as a post. I like the other episodes with the more feminine themes. Suited for Success is actually rather high on my list. It's the hallmark of a good writer to make something completely unappealing to a person interesting. Fullerton was able to do what the aforementioned Suited for Success. It just has to be done well. It wasn't done well here. So what's wrong with this episode? For starters, Twilight was the one claiming she wanted a slumber party. This is the same Twilight who not only didn't have any friends growing up, didn't want any. And there she was, claiming that she always wanted a slumber party. True, even the antisocial can have dreams of activities that can only be done with others. I know. I have my own fair share, but the way she jumped straight to it just wasn't natural. Applejack returned sometime later and got a glimpse of the hell that lay before her. That girl had some sense in her and the desire to just get out of there, but that storm kept her trapped. Then Rarity asked her to play her part in this slumber party. Shit out of nowhere. She claimed that she didn't want to ruin Twilight's first. While a nice sentiment, it made the whole conflict seem even more forced and contrived than it already was. All of this flew under Twilight's radar. I didn't question it at the time, but oh boy did I come to regret that decision. Sometime later, Twilight consulted one of her precious books, Slumber 101, All You've Wanted to Know About Slumber Parties But Were Afraid to Ask. I would like to reference a lot more if that book wasn't the cause of so much grief that night. It told Twilight that they had to tell ghost stories, as if it was her master. Perhaps it was. The way she clutched that book that night, it was as if she owed it her soul. Or at least her brain. Rarity and Applejack immediately used the ghost story angle to insult each other. Perhaps Twilight did notice, perhaps she didn't. All I know is that she wasn't saying anything that didn't come straight from that book. That was until it was Twilight's turn to tell the story. Was it a good one? I couldn't tell you for the life of me. Time seemed to turn into a blur. The next thing I noticed was Applejack and Rarity huddling each other in fear. Knowing now what I know about Twilight, it could have been any number of things that chilled them to the bone. The next order Twilight's book bade them was to make s'mores. It was probably the least interesting part of the night, really. Rarity and Applejack took the opportunity to argue, nothing I hadn't seen prior. It could have been cut out of the night altogether, but I suppose that every last insult had its place. One thing led to another, and soon the girls were playing truth or dare. Or just dare, really, because the word truth didn't pop up once that night. Instead, Applejack and Rarity dared each other to try and be like them, for reasons I can't comprehend. Perhaps they were frustrated, but this was the way their little sisters would act, not grown, responsible adults. At least, I thought they were grown, responsible adults, and I thought that Twilight was some sort of genius. There really is only one word for how Twilight was acting that night. Stupid. Stupid enough to not know what a pillow fight was, at least. I guess her precious book didn't have diagrams. I'm sure some pony would have beamed her upside the head, but the pillows got to her first. It was enough to get her to call it a night. Of course, Rarity and Applejack were forced to share a bed. I suppose the night wasn't just hard on me. It sparked rumors of the two of them sleeping together. Honestly, I could never see it. The only chemistry they shared was volatile. An explosion of bickering woke Twilight, and she finally realized that her friends had been fighting the whole night. True, that gave me some hope for her intelligence, until she asked the question that must not be asked.
I mean, is there anything else that could possibly go wrong?
No one asked that question because they all know the answer is yes. As it was that night, lightning struck a tree branch that threatened to fall. Applejack lassoed it up while Rarity tried to stop her, but it was no use. Applejack pulled that branch and it fell right into the library. It's at times like this when I wonder what she thought would happen. Applejack ain't the smartest pony, but she should have had an understanding that if you pull a branch, it's gotta fall somewhere. Speaking of intelligence and the lack thereof, Twilight realized that there was a giant tree branch in her room, only to then claim that there's no information about it in her book. Any defense of her intelligence that night has just gone up in smoke. No one, no matter how stupid, would look through a slumber party book in order to find the answer to what to do about a tree branch in your room. Meanwhile, Rarity was attempting to clean the disaster area, and for the life of me, I can't tell you why. Perhaps stupidity is contagious. Maybe it's some sort of disease in Equestria. It would explain Twilight's odd varying intelligence level. It was Applejack who apologized, which would speak wonders for her character if she hadn't spent the whole episode arguing over petty bullshit. Rarity's character is of question as well, considering she only helped after she got what she wanted, and that's about as shallow as it gets. Then this episode thinks it has the right to have a touching moment. Any moment like this is meaningless if the plot moves the characters with little to no reason. I still have a hard time, to this day, believing that Twilight would not only want a slumber party, but either want it so badly as to ignore her friends at each other's throats, or be too stupid to notice it. And if she was noticing it, it was selfish of her to keep up the charade, knowing how against each other they were, even if their arguments were incredibly petty. The whole thing was forced. Characters with no right to be there were in a plot that shouldn't have existed, reaching a conclusion by dumbing down the characters, forcing conflicts, and making it as unpleasant as possible. So yeah, I think this episode is shit. This episode starts out with Twilight going into town, which seems eerily abandoned. Neither Twilight nor Spike know what's going on, until Pinkie calls them into Sugar Cube Corner. We find out that she, the other main six, and Applejack's sister Applebloom are hiding from her. They identify her as Sakura, and are all deathly afraid of her because she lives in the Everfree Forest, and looks different. No, I don't know how they know her name. Wait, they're not really going to do a racism episode, are they? Well, if anyone can do it, it's you. Every pony starts spouting rumors about Sakura, which Twilight finds utterly ridiculous. Twilight identifies Sakura as a zebra. One of the reasons that they're afraid of Sakura is because she lives in the Everfree Forest, and I actually kinda don't blame them, since the last thing to come out of the forest was this. And Sakura does literally nothing but look menacing and poke the ground with her hoof. Then Pinkie sings a song that lacks something called melody. Let me just say that this episode is lucky that songs don't count towards my final ranking of the episode. Twilight dispels all of the rumors about Sakura as completely ridiculous. The only pony to actually side with Twilight is Applebloom, who nobody listens to because she's just a little kid. Twilight then suggests that if any pony were brave enough to approach Sakura, they would find out the truth. And Applebloom, like your typical kid character, decides that she is brave enough to talk with a stranger that even the adults are afraid of. Do you see the problem with this scene? So Applebloom follows along after Sakura. It isn't until later that the adults, too caught up in their arguing, notice that Applebloom is gone. When they find this out, they decide to chase after Sakura, who is on her way back into the Everfree Forest. Applebloom is about to enter the forest. Wait a minute. Applebloom, I know you're just a kid, but you've got to know that that place is dangerous. Do you remember the last thing that came out of there? The adults catch up to Applebloom when she gets to a patch of blue flowers. Finally, Sakura decides to speak for the first time.
Beware! Beware, you pony folk! Those leaves of blue are not a joke!
In rhyme. No, I don't know why. It's just her thing, okay? She sort of warns them about the blue flowers that surround them, because they are not going to be important in any way whatsoever. The main six start talking about how Sakura is evil, while Twilight continues to try to dispel the rumors. All the while, we hear squishy noises that have absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the episode. Nothing at all. That night, Twilight has nightmares and wakes up all sweaty. She soon realizes that her horn has gone all floppy. And yes, it does remind me of something. Moving on, Spike suggests that it's a curse, but Twilight firmly believes that there are no such thing as curses. Spike also suggests a book entitled Supernaturals, but Twilight doesn't even want to look in it because of the title. Subtle. Really subtle. The other main six come in and are apparently cursed as well. Pinkie has a swollen tongue because Fate is as annoyed as I was with her in this episode. Rainbow's wings are inverted, causing her to crash into things, more than usual. Rarity's hair becomes all frizzy. Applejack is now the size of a mouse, and Fluttershy...
Good gravy, girl! What's wrong with you?
I don't want to talk about it.
Most of this episode's humor comes from the curses, and yes, they are kinda funny. The main six believe that Sakura cursed them, except for Twilight, who still doesn't believe in curses. Applebloom realizes the error of her ways and leaves, believing that she can get Sakura to fix the main six's problems. Applejack, with her newfound size, decides to tag along to stop Applebloom from getting into trouble. Meanwhile, the other main six think that they sat on Applejack, but realize that Applebloom is also gone and decide to chase after her into the Everfree Forest. Applebloom makes it into the Everfree Forest when Applejack makes herself known, and tries to get Applebloom to turn around. Applebloom decides that she doesn't have to listen to Applejack and leaves her on a tree branch in the middle of the Everfree Forest. Then she runs away. Stop. Just stop. Applejack, the pony who nobody had seen in a week, when they were preparing a party in her honor, is now the size of a mouse, and you leave her in the middle of a predator-filled forest. And you don't even mark where you left her? There's childish mischief, and then there's just evil. You left Applejack for dead. Luckily, and I do mean luckily, Rainbow crashes into Applejack on her way to Zeccora's. The other main six get to Zeccora's first, and see that her house is filled with strange decor, and she's making some weird potion while chanting what seems to be an incantation. Wow, you're really, really subtle in this episode. Then Fluttershy sings the song from earlier, and yes, it is really funny.
She's an evil enchantress, and she does evil dances. And if you look deep in her eyes, she will put you in trances. Then what will she do? She'll mix up an evil brew. Then she'll gobble you up in a big tasty stew.
All of this convinces Twilight that Zeccora just might be bad, but she still has hope. Then Zeccora mentions Applebloom and Twilight loses all credibility in this episode. Rainbow and Applejack crash into Zeccora's house and start breaking everything, getting Zeccora rather upset. The other main six barge in and use this opportunity to confront Zeccora. Zeccora is understandably angry because Applebloom comes in and she is completely unharmed. We learn that the curses of the main six were caused by those blue flowers from earlier. They're called Poison Joke, and they're pretty much a wild card for fanfiction writers. The cure for it is an herbal bath, found in a book called Supernaturals. The moral at the end is that you should never judge a book by its cover. And this episode fails. No, I'm not kidding. I could fail it for Applebloom leaving Applejack for dead alone, but for curiosity's sake, let's see exactly what they did wrong. They broke one of the most sacred rules in fiction writing: show, don't tell, especially in children's entertainment. The rumors about Zeccora are only dispelled by Twilight claiming that they are ridiculous, but she loses all credibility at the end by being convinced that Zeccora is all she's cracked up to be. If Zeccora had been kind to Applebloom when she snuck away for the first time, then this episode would have worked so much better. Yes, I am being harsh, but when it comes to a moral like this, you cannot screw up. Join us next time when My Little Pony tackles HIV.
I am the Lorax. I speak for the trees.
This episode starts off with Fluttershy picking flowers in a scene that nearly gave my computer diabetes. She's preparing for an upcoming visit from Princess Celestia when she comes across a small, round, insectoid creature and finds it cute. It then eats all of Fluttershy's apples and wins her affection, so she decides to show it to her friends. Meanwhile, Twilight is back in character and is uber stressed about Princess Celestia's visit. It's supposed to be casual, but according to Twilight, there's nothing casual about a visit from royalty. She tells Spike to clean up the library mess and takes a stroll through town to see how everyone else's preparations are coming. The whole town is really into this visit thing, and everything actually looks pretty impressive. Eventually, Twilight gets to Sugar Cube Corner to check on an upcoming banquet, but sees Pinkie eating all of the food, and Pinkie justifies it in her own Pinkie way. Fluttershy bursts in and shows the two of them the creature, but now there are three. Twilight finds them amazing and decides to take one. Pinkie, however, finds them disgusting, and identifies them as parasprites. She then claims that she has to find a trombone.
A what? A trombone, you know.
Okay then. Twilight goes to check up on Rarity and Rainbow Dash, and what the buck is Rainbow wearing? The strange part about this scene is that Rainbow is complaining more about boredom than that ridiculous getup. Three parasprites pop out of Twilight's hair, and both Rarity and Rainbow Dash decide to take one. Pinkie comes in, looking for an accordion because she's Pinkie. The other three are too preoccupied with their parasprites to notice her. Later that night, everything is sparkly clean, so Twilight finally decides to get some sleep. When she wakes up, there are hundreds of parasprites in her house. Spike claims that he fed their parasprite in the middle of the night. I wonder if he got it wet, too. Either way, he has no idea where the other parasprites came from. The parasprites start wrecking Twilight's library because they can. Twilight immediately takes charge and tries to round them up, with Spike's help. We cut to Rainbow Dash, who wakes up to find out that she has the same problem, and the parasprites swarm her. Rarity surprisingly seems to be accepting of her swarm, until she learns how they reproduce, asexually by barfing up their offspring. As you might have imagined, Rarity doesn't take too kindly to it. She packs up her parasprites and runs into Pinkie, who now has a harmonica. Pinkie sort of claims that they need to find a bunch of instruments. Rarity writes it off as a nonsense scavenger hunt and decides to deal with the parasprites herself. Rarity runs into Twilight and Rainbow joins along, and they check on Fluttershy, who has no idea what to do with the parasprites. Twilight imagines that the pair of sprites will eat Princess Celestia, and decides that they've got to get rid of the swarm before she gets there. Applejack comes in with a bunch of apples, and the pair of sprites devour them almost instantly. That gives Twilight the idea to have Applejack herd up the pair of sprites. All 5 of them actually do a pretty good job rounding up the pair of sprites and sending them back into the forest, because moving your problems somewhere else definitely makes them go away. Pinkie runs alongside them. She tells the others to drop what they're doing and help her find some maracas, and Twilight writes it off as more Pinkie nonsense. Pinkie runs off to find her instruments, frustrated that her friends aren't listening to her. So they roll the giant ball of bugs into the forest, congratulate themselves, and get back to town. Fluttershy opens the door to her cottage, and a whole new swarm pours out because she couldn't resist keeping at least one. Nice job breaking it, hero. Rainbow Dash decides to give it a go, and she makes a tornado to suck up all the parasprites like a vacuum. And it works, until Pinkie Pie comes in with cymbals. The wind force causes her to lose them, and they get dragged into the tornado. With cymbals slicing around, Rainbow is no longer able to hold the tornado, and it disperses. Then the parasprites head towards Ponyville. Pinkie's friends are understandably upset with her. Pinkie's about to tell them what she's doing, but gets sidetracked in her own Pinkie way. The others leave her to her thoughts and head towards town. The town's ponies see the parasprites and seem intrigued by them, until the dramatic music starts and they start eating everything, including some cake that causes Lyra to cry. Damn, must have been some good cake. They eat pretty much all of the food in town, and Applejack realizes that she needs to protect her crop. Twilight casts a spell to make them stop eating all of the food. Wait, Twilight can do that? That seems pretty cruel. Stopping an animal from being able to eat? At first it seems to work, but then they start to eat everything that's not food, and now they really are destroying the town. And now everyone starts to panic. Rarity first. She checks her store, and the parasprites are eating everything. Pinkie comes in to save the day, steals a recorder, and then leaves. Applejack sees the swarm heading for her farm. She prepares to defend her apples, and is surprised when they instead eat her barn.
Didn't see that one coming.
Parasprites are also eating the words out of the books in Twilight's library. No, I don't know how that works. Twilight snatches one and shows it to Sakura. Wait, Sakura? A minor character who was established only 1 episode ago. That's impressive. Who wrote this episode? M.A. Larson. Okay, I'll keep that in mind. Anyway, she also identifies them as parasprites. They're pretty much locusts. Otherwise, she claims that there's nothing she can do. Twilight returns to town to see that the princess has almost arrived. But everything has pretty much gone to hell, and Twilight snaps. Her broad idea to fix the problem is to build an exact copy of Ponyville a few feet away. It's so crazy, it just might work. Actually, no. She realizes that she's pretty much boned. Trumpets blare in the background, and Twilight believes that the princess procession has come. It actually turns out to be Pinkie, with the one pony band, and the parasprites seem to respond happily. They start following Pinkie, much to everyone else's surprise. The others follow Pinkie and her army of parasprites out of town to see Princess Celestia land. And she thinks that the parasprites are part of a parade. Either she's an idiot, or she's a troll. Considering that she says Philadelphia has an infestation problem, I'm going with the latter. And yes, she's still an asshole. Then we get the lesson that you should listen to your friends' ideas and perspectives. Then they all apologize to Pinkie for not listening to her, especially after she saved Ponyville.
Or not.
Okay, before I say anything else, I just want to say I love how this episode starts here.
Squirrel. But remember, these flowers are for Princess Celestia. Only the prettiest ones will do.
And ends here. I don't know, I just think it says something about the show. Speaking of which, I loved the humor in this episode. Each joke was perfectly timed, and none of them seemed to flop. The only real problem most people seem to have with this episode is that Pinkie doesn't exactly make it clear to the others that she knew the answer to the infestation problem. I don't really have that problem, because everyone seemed largely in character, and everyone just wanted to solve the problem their way. Also, Pinkie probably assumed that her friends would catch on, because they're still learning about each other. And so are the writers, by the way. I'm giving this episode a gold. It's a good episode, and one I tend to revisit a lot, even if it is just to see rampant destruction. If you'll excuse me, I'm in the mood for some Katamari Damacy.
I collect spores, molds, and fungus.
This episode starts with Twilight waking up all excited. Apparently it's winter wrap-up, the last day before spring, where all of the ponies clean up winter. And due to a tradition, Ponyville doesn't use magic to change the seasons. Yes, in this episode it is established that ponies change the seasons themselves. Twilight realizes that she's been overzealous, and it's like 3 in the morning. When morning finally comes, Twilight rushes into town and sees a bunch of ponies already gathered for the jobs today. There are 3 teams. The blue team takes care of the weather, the green team takes care of the plants, and the tan team takes care of the animals. Twilight has no idea which team she'll be a part of, and Spike just wants to go back to bed. The mayor gives a debriefing, you know, just mayor stuff. You'll notice that she's not wearing any vest herself because she's a lazy. Twilight doesn't know which team to go on and wants to decide. And here comes this episode's song, Winter Wrap-Up.
Months of winter coolness and awesome holidays.
We've kept our hoofsies warm at home, time off from work to play.
But the food we've stored is running out, and we can't grow in this cold.
And even though I love my boots, this fashion's getting old.
The time has come to welcome spring, and all things warm and green. But it's also time to say goodbye. It's winter, we must...
If you're wondering why songs don't factor into my final ranking of the episode, well, I wasn't thinking of this episode specifically, but it makes a good case for it. This show has a habit of putting really good songs in otherwise okay episodes. I like this song, everybody does. It's the first big musical number of the show, and it's much better than just telling us what every team does. Just keep in mind that it has nothing to do with my final ranking of the episode. So, Twilight doesn't know which team she wants to be a part of. She sees Rainbow Dash, the leader of the weather team. Twilight asks if she could be a part of the weather team. The answer is no, she can't. Twilight doesn't have wings, so the weather team is out. And Spike falls back asleep. No, I don't know why he's in this episode either. Comic relief, maybe. Twilight goes to Rarity, who is busy making birds' nests, and asks if she can help. She tries to help, but fails to make anything other than a total embarrassment. So yeah, making bird nests is out for Twilight. Twilight finds Pinkie, who is skating on ice. She's skating to make it easier to break. Twilight decides to help, but she has no idea how to skate, and you see where this is going. Yep, but after that crash, skating is out. Pinkie suggests that Fluttershy could use some help with the critters as part of the animal team. Fluttershy is using the bells to wake up hibernating animals. If you don't know what hibernation is, this episode goes out of its way to explain it. I know that during Season 1, this was technically an educational show, but this is the only time they do something like that, and it was completely awkward. Twilight decides to wake up the animals from their hibernation, and she wakes up some snakes, bats, bees, and a skunk. Wow, that was unfortunate. During a tomato bath, Spike suggests that Twilight use magic. Twilight refuses because it goes against tradition. So you're teaching kids to use counterproductive traditions. Alright then, Twilight goes to see if Applejack needs some help. She's using some plows and Twilight wants to help. Twilight tries and fails before she even gets started this time. This is the final straw and Twilight decides to use magic. The plow gets going and she's moving faster than every pony else. Of course, Twilight manages to screw up again because she can't control her magic for some reason. And she causes a snowslide. Applejack scolds Twilight for using magic, causing her to run away crying. Now Twilight's all depressed, hiding out in a bush because there's no way she can help. And she overhears the teams arguing because they are completely unorganized. They learn that Ponyville has been late for winter wrap-up each and every year. Basically, everyone else has failed their job, and then there's a bunch of arguing. Twilight has finally found her place, gets everyone's attention, and organizes everything during an acoustic instrumental rendition of Winter Wrap-Up. Twilight's organization helps everyone get their job done quickly, and saves Ponyville from embarrassment and scandal. Winter is completely wrapped up by the next morning, and spring has arrived on time. Twilight gets a vest with all 3 colors, and the title All-Team Organizer, because she's special. Then we end on a moral that we all have hidden talents, and if we're diligent, we can find them. I said songs don't factor into my final ranking of an episode because the song is really good and the episode is just okay. The humor was okay, the moral was okay, the story and conflict, it was okay, even the animation was just okay. There's nothing really bad about this episode except for that awkward hibernation scene, but nothing really shining about it except for the song, which doesn't count here. Still, it's nice to have an episode that doesn't take place in the standard midsummer. I wish we had a few more of them. I think it's safe to give this episode a bronze. Congratulations, Winter Wrap-Up. You're so okay, you've earned it. This episode starts in a schoolhouse of all places. We get a close-up of all the children's flanks and see their special marks. The teacher, Charlie, comes in and identifies them as cutie marks. A pony gets their cutie mark when they discover their special talent, or what makes them different. A kid in the class passes Applebloom a note, and the teacher catches her, but the note is blank. Wait, is this episode following Applebloom? Well, I can dig it, as long as she doesn't leave anyone in the Everfree Forest. Sorry, I still can't get over that. Applebloom leaves the schoolhouse all depressed because she doesn't have her cutie mark yet. The 2 bullies from earlier give Applebloom and her friend a hard time, and tell them about an upcoming party, celebrating them getting their cutie marks. Yes, this is Diamond Tiara and her lackey Silver Spoon. No one likes Diamond Tiara, and no one cares about Silver Spoon. Moving on, Applebloom goes to talk to her sister Applejack, complaining that she doesn't have her cutie mark. Applebloom is impatient. She doesn't want to go to Diamond Tiara's party without one, to save herself from embarrassment. Applejack says that everyone in their family was last in their class to get their cutie mark, which gives Applebloom the idea that her unique talent must have something to do with apples. It's a logical conclusion, since everyone in Applejack's family does have something to do with apples. So Applebloom goes to town to help Applejack sell some apples. She tries to peddle them by showing their multiple uses and annoys the townsponies. She also seems to have a hard time taking no for an answer. Her cutie mark doesn't appear, so she gets more impatient and starts scaring customers. Then she places apples in Bonbon's sack and tries to get her to pay for it. It doesn't end well, and Applebloom is no longer able to help sell apples. Applebloom is still impatient to get her cutie mark, but Applejack reassures her that she shouldn't be in a hurry to grow up. Applejack asks if there are any other fillies in Applebloom's class that don't have their cutie marks yet. Turns out that yes, there is, Twist, Applebloom's friend from earlier. Applebloom goes to ask Twist if they want to go to Diamond Tiara's party together, but it turns out that Twist has her cutie mark too, leaving Applebloom all alone. Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon come by and make Applebloom sad. Like, really, totally sad. Like, I don't think I've ever seen anything sadder than this. Rainbow Dash sees how sad Applebloom is and wants to know what's going on. Then Applebloom explains. Rainbow decides to help Applebloom, claiming that she can make a cutie mark appear. Her idea is to get Applebloom to do as many things as possible as quickly as possible. Makes sense to me. They try the most oddball things. Juggling, hang gliding, karate, and kite flying. Wait, kite flying? If your special talent is flying a kite, I'm sorry to say, but you're kinda screwed for life. Okay then, roller derby. Applebloom fails at pretty much everything and hides in a bush when Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon walk by. Then Pinkie comes by and suggests that Applebloom would be good at eating cupcakes. An idea that she really likes. Applebloom, that sounds like a good idea at first, but I wouldn't plan on living a long, healthy life if that's your special talent. When they finally get to Sugar Cube Corner, Pinkie flips in her own Pinkie way and suggests that Applebloom should try to help her make some cupcakes. Oh, that's really clever, Pinkie. Make the kid do your work for you. Then we get to this episode's song, Cupcakes. I'm sorry to say this, but this song kind of freaks the hell out of me. Yeah, I know that this song has nothing to do with anything outside of the show, but that doesn't change facts. It freaks the hell out of me. Once again, Applebloom fails at baking cupcakes. See those piles of... Yeah, that's what the best batch looked like. Pinkie, how could you eat that? Well, I suppose there are worse things you could put in cupcakes. Applebloom thinks that she's got a cutie mark, but it turns out to just be flour. Then Twilight comes in and sees the mess. Both of the messes. Applebloom demands that Twilight help her get a cutie mark with her magic. Twilight tries, but is unable to. And when I say she tries until she gets physically exhausted. Applebloom feels defeated and decides that she isn't going to the party after all. Or she wouldn't if it wasn't right at Sugar Cube Corner, starting right now. So now Applebloom is at the party and she wants to get out before anyone sees her. She tries to hide, but her hiding places vanish. Wait, that guy's special talent is popping things? Applebloom, are you sure you still want a cutie mark? I mean, you might end up with something like that. Applebloom almost makes it out before she bumps into Applejack, who forces her into the spotlight. Diamond Tiara is about to bully Applebloom when she ties a tablecloth around herself in desperation. Applebloom tries to make it sound like her cutie mark is the best ever, and that's why she's hiding it. Diamond Tiara is so dense she actually starts to believe the lie, but Applebloom trips over the tablecloth, knocks the phonograph off its track, and is now completely exposed in front of everyone. Diamond Tiara and Silver Spoon start to tease her when someone shouts out to defend Applebloom. It's revealed to be two other fillies who come to Applebloom's defense and give a pretty heartwarming speech. They're blank flanks too, and their names are Sweetie Belle and Scootaloo. They upstage Diamond Tiara. Sweet, sweet karma. The three of them decide to join the Cutie Mark Crusaders, a problem that I will have to deal with at a later date. Then we end on a moral that what you think may lose you friends may actually help you gain friends. This was a strange episode to be certain, if only because it didn't really follow any of the main six. Sure, they made appearances, but it wasn't their story, so it was already at a disadvantage putting a character that we either hated or didn't care about center stage. Either way, we really didn't know much about her, but they actually did a really good job introducing Applebloom and giving an introduction to the Cutie Mark Crusaders, hereby called the CMC. I'm going to give their episodes the same rankings as I give any other episode, just fair warning. Just because an episode is a CMC episode does not bias my rating in either way. The most shining element of this episode is the moral, and it's a really mature one. There's actually two. The first moral, shown throughout the episode, is that you should never really be in a hurry to grow up. And as much as we've heard the moral everywhere, it's still a good and important one. But the actual moral couldn't have been done better. I don't really have any gripes with this episode, so I'm giving it a gold. This episode starts out with Rainbow Dash and Applejack playing a game of horseshoes, and yes, it does seem very meta. I also noticed that some of the trees in the background are multicolored, indicating that it's now autumn, which is odd. Didn't they clean up winter 2 episodes ago? Did we skip 6 months or something? Anyway, Applejack wins the game of horseshoes, and Rainbow doesn't take it well. She doesn't like losing, even in a friendly competition. She challenges Applejack to an iron pony competition.
I challenge you to an iron pony competition. A series of athletic contests to decide who's the best once and for all. You know what, Rainbow? You're on.
We cut to Rainbow and Applejack explaining the event to Twilight. She's going to be the judge and keep score, and Spike is going to be the announcer to the other main 6. So the games begin. Rainbow and Applejack are pretty evenly matched throughout the games. It actually gets pretty exciting. Eventually, they start to draw an audience as the events go on because I don't know. And Rainbow ties herself up. Don't look too deeply into that. At the halfway point, Rainbow and Applejack are all tied up and doing a push-up contest. Rainbow is about to lose when she uses her wings to help her. That is definitely cheating, but Applejack decides to be a good sport. But then Rainbow starts using her wings during every event, to which Twilight and the audience have no problem with. Even when Rainbow Dash is holding the rope in the sky in tug of war. Rainbow obviously ends up winning by a landslide.
Mudslide in your case.
Applejack calls cheating. Rainbow claims that no one said that she couldn't use her wings, so they decide to have a rematch. Tomorrow is the annual running of the leaves. It's basically a marathon, and they're going to race each other. But to keep Rainbow playing fair, she's not allowed to fly. I would complain about the cheating earlier, but they do make it clear that it's all in good fun. The next day, Spike and Twilight are on their way to the race, and Spike wants to be the announcer again. But that job is taken by Pinkie Pie, and she explains what the whole running of the leaves thing is. The ponies run through the woods to get the leaves to fall. If the ponies didn't run, the leaves wouldn't fall. Applejack and Rainbow get ready to start the race, and Applejack ties some ropes around Rainbow's wings. Okay then. Pinkie lets Spike announce with her, and most of the comic relief comes from them in this episode. They don't have much to do with anything, so I'm not going to bring up their moments. Twilight is also in the race because she thinks it'll be fun, I guess. No, she's not out of character in this episode. And Rainbow Dash and Applejack make fun of this, so I don't have to. So the race begins. Applejack and Rainbow are pretty neck and neck, and they have a stiff competition, until Applejack trips. She obviously assumes that Rainbow tripped her up. Twilight, trotting by, points out that it was just a rock. And this is the problem with Season 1 in general. Since Twilight was the only one who could write a letter to the princess, and every episode needed a moral, she was shoehorned into plots she didn't need to be in. Prime examples of this are Look Before You Sleep and Green Isn't Your Color. And yes, it's going to count against this episode. Rainbow's way far ahead and slows down, only to have Applejack pass her, and we're back to exciting race action, until Rainbow trips. She obviously assumes that it was Applejack. Twilight points out that it was the stump that Rainbow tripped over, but Rainbow doesn't buy it. In her mind, Applejack cheated, and now all bets are off. It isn't long before Applejack and Rainbow are neck and neck once again, but Rainbow decides to give herself a little bit of a lead, swinging a branch into Applejack's face. Applejack realizes that Rainbow did that on purpose, and decides that two can play underhanded. She uses the branch and springs herself forward. Then Applejack kicks a bee's nest down, which forces Rainbow to run ahead. She loses the bees and then switches the directional sign, sending Applejack off course. While she's laughing about it, all the other runners pass her without her noticing. It's only when Twilight comes by does Rainbow realize how far behind she actually is. Applejack runs to the top of a mountain where she comes to Pinkie and Spike's hot air balloon, and they take Applejack back to the race. This is also why I didn't complain about them being in this episode. They had a purpose other than spouting the moral at the end. In fact, they could have done that everything Twilight did in this episode. Back to the race. Applejack lands in front of Rainbow and kicks over a bucket of tree sap. Rainbow gets stuck in it and is now in last place. But Rainbow is able to use the sticky tree sap as a slingshot to land in first place. But this causes Applejack to go into a tailspin. That tailspin consumes Rainbow and they both end up on a ledge. The ledge breaks and they fall down. Twilight runs by and scolds them. I know they teased Twilight earlier, but she really comes off as unsufferable in this episode. So Rainbow and Applejack get back into a run and they start bumping into each other. Rainbow runs ahead and Applejack bites Rainbow's tail. Again. I told you guys she liked it. When Rainbow gets back in front, Applejack bites off Rainbow's ropes and Rainbow flies forward. Applejack hops on top of her and they go into a tumble across the finish line. They tied. For last place. Twilight comes by with a medal. No, she didn't win. She got 5th because she paced herself, and I need to call bullshit. I've got to assume that there are at least some semi-experienced runners in that crowd. And this is Twilight's first race. Pacing will only get you so far. If you want to actually place in a race, it takes practice and skill, neither of which Twilight has. Maybe the 5th or 6th year she tries she can place, but not the first one. So yeah, Twilight spouts the lesson of the princess who arrives because she loves the autumn sights, and Rainbow and Applejack are still good friends. Yes, this was a good episode. I'm giving it a silver though. The moral was pretty good. You should never let your desire to win overpower your friendship. The comedy was pretty good with Pinkie Pie and Spike playing off each other in the hot air balloon. The action was pretty intense, just like any good race should be, and the visuals were amazing with all of the autumn leaves. The only thing holding this episode back is Twilight. She didn't need to be here. Yes, I know the show eventually moved on from shoehorning Twilight into every episode, but the point still stands. If they actually gave her something to do, aside from being an insufferable Mary Sue, then I wouldn't be able to complain. Yes, I like Twilight, just not in this episode, or any other episode she's shoehorned into.
My name's Forrest Gump. People call me Forrest Gump.
This episode starts off with Rarity showing off a design for her gown for the Grand Galloping Gala to her cat. Yes, this is the first Rarity-focused episode, and after the last time she was in the spotlight, let's hope that this one is good. So, she gets her cat Opalescence to hold some crafting supplies. And, is that glue? What the buck is wrong with you people? Twilight and Applejack come in and interrupt Rarity's work. She asks if there is something she can help them with. Twilight needs her dress fixed up, but Rarity decides that it is hideous enough for her to make Twilight a new dress from scratch. And Rarity is going to make one for Applejack too. Rainbow crashes in and gives Rarity the idea to create an outfit for all of the main 6. And they're going to hold a fashion show. We get into this episode's song, Art of the Dress. This is actually my favorite Season 1 song. Probably because it's a parody of a real song, but that's not bad. It's a good song, and I really can't complain. When Rarity finishes the dresses, she shows them to the other main 6, who are less than impressed. They look really good, but they aren't what the other main 6 had in mind. They try to be grateful, but they can't get themselves to. Rarity decides that she's going to create a new set of dresses according to her friend's desires. We cut forward, and Rarity is looking noticeably disheveled. Fluttershy comes in to see her new gown. Once again, she doesn't really like it because...
The midi collar doesn't go with the shawl lapel. The hems are clearly machine stitched. The pleats are uneven. The fabric looks like toile, a traditional blanket stitch, and the over design is reminiscent of prêt-à-porter and not true French haute couture.
Yeah, I had the exact same reaction. Then we get to the second verse of the song. I said before that talking usually ruins a song for me, but it seems to work here. I'm not sure why, but it's probably because the lines are at least interesting, and have somewhat of a melody to them. So the song ends and Rarity herself finds the dresses horrendous. But the main 6 love their new dresses. We don't get to see them yet though. Spike runs in and says that a bigwig fashion designer, Hoity Toity, just so happens to be visiting Ponyville, and wants to see Rarity's fashion show. The fashion show begins, and Rarity is looking pretty nervous. Spike is once again the announcer, and he is pretty good at it. So the main 6 come out, and every pony finds the dresses hideous, because they look absolutely ridiculous. The main 6 realize how badly they screwed up, and Hoity Toity isn't impressed whatsoever. He demands to know who made them. Spike calls Rarity out, and she basks in the shame. Days later, the other main 6 go to check up on Rarity. They're obviously worried about her. Rarity says that she's never coming out again. She's obviously a little bit loopy and in a very melodramatic depression. Her friends want to get her out of it, though. Twilight sees one of Rarity's unfinished dresses and gets an idea. We cut to Rarity talking to herself about exile when she hears Opal meowing. Rainbow has put her up in a tree to get Rarity outside. I seriously want to know how they stole Rarity's cat without her noticing. When Rarity comes outside, she sees the other main 6 use Fluttershy's knowledge of sewing to finish Rarity's dress, and she just so happens to love it. The main 6 realize how badly they screwed up and apologize to Rarity. She forgives them, but believes that her career is still ruined. However, Hoity Toity comes by and gives Rarity another chance. And they have a pretty decent fashion show. Obviously the visuals stand out here, but so does the background music. And yes, the dresses are impressive. Hoity Toity is impressed, and Rarity is now out of her insanity depression. The moral at the end is your basic, you can't please everyone all the time, and also you should never look a gift horse in the mouth. When I started watching this show, I picked a favorite character and watched all of their episodes. I watched all of the Rainbow Dash episodes first, then all the Fluttershy episodes, then all the Pinkie Pie episodes. Then I started watching random episodes, until I watched this one. I was not fond of Rarity, and by all accounts, I should have hated this episode. I mean, come on, a fashion show with my least favorite character? Really?
No, I don't like it. I love it!
Yes, the song does factor into my own personal enjoyment of this episode, but it would be great without the song. It perfectly shows the conflict an artist often has between pleasing themselves and pleasing their customers, something that often does not coincide. The humor was really good, especially with the ridiculous looking dresses during the first fashion show. The only real complaint I have with this episode is that the other main 6 are a little uncharacteristically demanding. But they do learn their lesson by the end, and it doesn't detract from the episode whatsoever. Suited for Success gets a gold. This episode starts off with Twilight actually practicing her magic. That hasn't happened in a while. The last time I've seen this, I think, was in Boast Busters. Oh no. She turns a stick into a cane and a rock into a top hat, but gets distracted by Pinkie making a noise, and they turn back, banging Spike in the head. I love this episode already. The two of them notice that Pinkie is acting stranger than usual. It seems that she's afraid the sky is going to fall. Her tail is twitching and she keeps looking up. Twilight goes to ask her what's going on. Pinkie explains that because her tail is twitching, her Pinkie sense tells her that stuff is going to start falling. Because that is insane troll logic, Twilight doesn't believe it, and she gets a frog to the face. And apparently Pinkie can speak frog now. Fluttershy dropped the frog. She's taking them to Froggy Bottom Bog because they keep hopping into each other. Subtle. Really subtle. And then she leaves. So does Pinkie. And then Twilight goes off to practice her magic while Spike fanboys about Pinkie's Pinkie sense. Twilight writes it off as coincidence until Pinkie runs back saying that something else is going to fall. Turns out that something is Twilight. Twilight still doesn't believe Pinkie's nonsense. Applejack comes by and apparently she firmly believes in Pinkie's sense. Pinkie comes back and says that her ears are flopping. She doesn't tell us what that means, just that Twilight is going to need a bath. And then she gets splashed with mud. Twilight is taking a bath and Pinkie starts explaining about her Pinkie sense. From what I can gather, it's like rheumatism multiplied by 10, on steroids, on ecstasy, on meth. But that's just what I got. We learn of a few different ticks that have nothing to do with anything, and Pinkie pulls an alligator out of the tub. This is Gummy, Pinkie's pet toothless alligator, who has absolutely nothing to do with this episode. No, seriously. On the way out, Twilight claims that she still doesn't believe in Pinkie sense. Pinkie says that it's the same thing as Twilight's magic. Twilight gets on her soapbox and explains how magic is not anything like Pinkie sense. Magic A is magic A, I'll spare you the details. Pinkie then explains that sometimes she gets combos that make Pinkie sense even more confusing. This combo that she gets right here means that some pony is going to get hit with a door. Even after getting hit with the door, Twilight still doesn't believe in Pinkie sense. Pinkie says that Twilight doesn't believe in Pinkie sense because she doesn't understand it. So, Twilight makes it her personal mission to understand Pinkie sense by hooking Pinkie up to a polygraph machine. Okay then. So, Twilight waits for one of Pinkie's ticks for a total of about 15 seconds. No, really, I counted. She went through all of this to hook Pinkie up and waits only about 15 seconds before getting too impatient. Transitions! Use them! Pinkie says that sometimes you should just believe in things, even if you can't understand them. And this is the problem that everyone has with this episode. That's a terrible moral. Luckily, Twilight doesn't buy into it, until Pinkie frustrates her. She's hungry, so Twilight detaches Pinkie and has completely given up. And then Twilight gets hit with another door. No, she still doesn't believe in Pinkie sense, but is now once again determined to figure it out. If my scripting sounds confused, this episode is confused. We cut to Fluttershy, who's dropping her frogs off. And then back to Pinkie Pie, who is sniffing flowers. No, I don't know why that was necessary. Twilight is spying on Pinkie in safari gear. She wants to get to the bottom of Pinkie sense once more, and Fate decides that it hates her because every time Pinkie gets her Pinkie sense, Twilight gets some sort of karmic abuse. Because cartoons, that's why. We find out later that Pinkie knew all along that Twilight was spying on her, but didn't tell her because it would have ruined Twilight's fun. Twilight angrily walks up, and Pinkie's whole body starts shaking. This means that there's going to be a doozy, and it's going to happen at Froggy Bottom Bog, which means that Fluttershy might be in danger, so every pony heads there, with Twilight still being skeptical, but she still goes on for the ride. They get to Froggy Bottom Bog and find that Fluttershy is alright. They're totally relieved. Twilight gloats that Pinkie sense was wrong. And then they get attacked by a Hydra. No, I'm not making that up. They seriously get attacked by a Hydra, and it looks pissed. So they all start running, and Fluttershy tells a frog that she's sorry. Well, that's kinda dark. The run is filled with some intense action until they get to a cliff. They need to jump across it or the Hydra is going to take them out. Fluttershy is a callback to Dragonshy and jumps across. Pinkie and Applejack jump across while Twilight distracts the Hydra, and she's actually pretty successful. But when Twilight runs back to the cliff, the Hydra takes out the stones the others used to jump across. It's a good thing that Twilight could teleport or else she'd be screwed.
Twilight! You have to jump!
No, she doesn't. She knows how to teleport.
You have to take a leap of faith!
So, you're telling me that Dave Polsky watched Dragonshy, but he didn't watch Applebuck season where Twilight was teleporting every 10 seconds for no apparent reason. Or maybe he had Twilight conveniently forget her abilities so she could have a spur of idiocy. Yeah, she makes it across, but it doesn't change the fact that what she did was stupid. Then Twilight learns that the Hydra wasn't the doozy, and she evolves into Rapidash.
Huh? But what?
The Hydra wasn't the doozy? How could it not be the doozy? What could be doozier than that?
Dunno, but it just wasn't it.
She admits that she believes in Pinkie's sense, and that happens to be the doozy. Yes, Twilight automatically believes it simply because she can't explain it. Now for the moral, the most infamous one in MLP history.
I am happy to report that I now realize there are wonderful things in this world you just can't explain, but that doesn't necessarily make them any less true. It just means you have to choose to believe in them, and sometimes it takes a friend to show you the way.
No, no, and no. There's a reason this episode is one of the most hated of Season 1. The only question is, where do I begin? Let's start with the moral because it's still fresh in our mind. First thing is first, you cannot choose to believe in anything. Your beliefs are decided by your experiences and your perceptions. If you think something is bogus, you're either not going to believe it or you're going to willfully delude yourself, which is not a healthy lifestyle choice. What I think they were trying here was faith versus fact, and if that's the case, they have failed spectacularly. There are 1,000 ways they could have done this better, like maybe Twilight manages to disprove Pinkie's sense, leading Pinkie into a depression, thinking that she's no longer special. Twilight, feeling guilty, fabricates Pinkie's sense, and kids learn that they should accept other people's beliefs because they might be important to that person. And that was just off the top of my head. Another complaint is Pinkie's sense itself, as in it's never really explained. I said it was like rheumatism. What's rheumatism? Basically when old people say the weather's getting damp because their elbow hurts or something, they've got rheumatism. Of course, this is rheumatism injected with cartoon logic. It would be excusable, but they don't explain it, which is a shame because Pinkie's sense could have been something pretty cool. The only thing that lasts after this episode is that a twitchy tail means something is going to fall. So yes, this is a terrible, terrible episode, and I love it. First of all, just because I find something critically bad doesn't mean I can't find it enjoyable. I am allowed to like bad episodes, or vice versa. You are too. Just because you like something that the critics don't, doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with your taste. And a lot of people like this episode, along with me. Just look on the TV Trope's Best Episode nominator. Why do I like this episode? This episode is just straight up funny. Dave Polsky is a flat-out slapstick writer, and as long as he stays away from the big morals, I really don't have a problem with him. He also has the habit of interjecting the funniest and weirdest dialogue in his episodes. So in conclusion, feeling Pinkie keen. I love the episode, but I'm not giving it a damn thing.
Rain, what do you want to do tonight?
The same thing we do every night, Pinkie. Try to take over the world.
The Pinkie and the Brain. Yes, Pinkie and the Brain. One is a genius, the other's insane. They're laboratory mice. Their genes have been spliced. They're Pinkie and the Brain.
This episode starts with the infamous Fluttershy cheering scene, and it probably would be really funny if I hadn't seen it 20 million times. You know what? It's actually still pretty funny. Rainbow is trying to teach Fluttershy how to cheer because she's going to be entering the Best Young Flyers competition. She's got a pretty interesting routine. She springboards off a cloud, weaves in and out of bushes, then spins clouds, and finally attempts something called the Sonic Rainboom. She nearly breaks the sound barrier, but fails and gets repelled. This causes her to crash into Twilight's library, of course right after she and the rest of the main six have finished cleaning it up. Did you expect Twilight's library to get trashed at any other time? Fluttershy comes in to cheer on Rainbow, even though she had failed spectacularly. Rainbow blames her failure on Fluttershy's cheering, and puts it out there that she wishes her other friends could come to Cloudsdale to watch the performance. But they can't, cause only Pegasi can walk on clouds. Pinkie wishes that she can go and see Rainbow perform the Sonic Rainboom. Twilight has no idea what it is, so Pinkie lets her in.
I guess it's like Rainbow Dash gets going so fast. Boom! Sonic Boom and a Rainbow can happen all at once!
And apparently Rainbow is the only pony who ever pulled it off. Yeah, I'll roll with that. Rainbow tells every pony that her plan is to pull off a Sonic Rainboom, so she can win the grand prize of spending a day with the Wonderbolts. Rainbow leaves, and then Fluttershy lets everyone in on the fact that Rainbow has tried to pull off a Sonic Rainboom hundreds of times, but each has ended in failure. Rarity then urges Twilight to find a spell to get the rest of them into Cloudsdale to support Rainbow, because she recognizes that Rainbow has stage fright. Pinkie finds a spell that allows Earth ponies to fly for 3 days. Rarity even volunteers for it. It's a very difficult spell, and we don't get to see the results either, but apparently it worked. Rainbow and Fluttershy arrive in Cloudsdale, where they meet some ponies from their childhood. They're assholes! But they do reveal that Rainbow dropped out of flight school, and the Sonic Rainboom is seen as an old mare's tail. And Rainbow is feeling a little distraught. Fluttershy tries to help, but it doesn't work. Rainbow thinks that if she fails, Princess Celestia will banish her to the Everfree Forest. You know what? I'd believe it. Oh, and the other main six arrive by a hot air balloon. Rarity has butterfly wings, and the others can now walk on clouds, due to a cloud walking spell. I find that odd. It's made clear that Rarity's wings are extremely fragile, so the cloud walking spell is much more reliable, yet it costs more energy. Yeah, it's a nitpick, it's just something that bugs me specifically. Rainbow and Fluttershy give the others a tour around Cloudsdale, and I really do like its design, although Rarity has found something else to admire. And all of the Pegasi take notice of Rarity's wings, increasing her vanity. Although, for practical purposes, the wings do nothing useful. Pinkie tastes the rainbow in the weather factory, and apparently those Skittle commercials have lied to me. Fluttershy tries to encourage Rainbow once more, but fails. And some ponies suggest that Rarity enters the Best Young Flyers competition, after she dazzles them by flying close to the sun. And she decides to enter, much to Rainbow's surprise. Rainbow firmly believes that she can't beat Rarity. We cut to the competition, where Rainbow is number 2. She sees her friends cheering, and Rarity is preparing in the bathroom. It seems that everyone is there to see the competition, even Princess Celestia, and so are the Wonderbolts. They're apparently the celebrity judges. Yeah, that actually makes a lot of sense. Once contestant number 1 goes out, Rainbow switches places with another contestant, and she does it a few times, getting increasingly more nervous. Rarity also stalls, but more out of vanity than fear. They stall so long that the competition is almost over and the two of them have to go out together. Rainbow isn't herself, but manages to get out there anyway. So the performances begin and Rarity does something. Rainbow tries to go for her routine and her nerves get the best of her, so she screws up twice. It's only when Rarity goes in for her grand finale do things get interesting. She flies up to the sun, and Rainbow flies up as well. Hey, has anyone heard the story of Icarus? No? Just wondering. So Rarity begins plummeting to the ground, and the Wonderbolts try to save her, but Rarity knocks their lights out. It's a good thing that an all-powerful alicorn sun goddess is sitting in the audience. You're not gonna do anything, are you? Still an asshole. Luckily, Rainbow sees Rarity and dashes afterwards, faster than she had ever done before. A mock cone starts to form around her, and she actually creates a Sonic Rainboom. And somehow Fluttershy stole Pinkie's voice. So yeah, Rainbow not only saved Rarity, but the Wonderbolts as well. Rarity apologizes, everyone forgives her, and Rainbow gets to spend the day with her idols, because she won. She flies off with 2 male Wonderbolts, saying that she has plans. Why do people assume she's Never mind. As time goes on, I am seeing more and more that it's rare that there's a near-universal opinion on an episode. Some of my favorites, like Too Many Pinkie Pies, Party of One, or Read It and Weep, I've seen on worst of lists. It's pretty unanimous that Sonic Rainboom is not just a good episode, but a great one. In fact, I think the Sonic Rainboom itself is the exact moment that this show proved it wasn't just another really good cartoon, but a great one as well. There really isn't much to complain about here. We get to see a new side of Rainbow, rounding out her character. The humor was really good, and everyone acted believable. Sonic Rainboom gets a gold. This episode starts out with Sweetie Belle watching Rarity go crazy. No, a fly didn't get into the store. Rarity's acting like this because she has a huge order to fill. And Sweetie Belle, like any good little sister, just wants to help. And like any normal little sister, she screws it up. Rarity does not want Sweetie Belle's help, even though Sweetie Belle is practically desperate to help to try to find her special talent. Yeah, we're forgetting the lesson learned at the end of Call of the Cutie. Get used to it. Enter Fluttershy. She's returning Rarity's cat, who apparently likes Fluttershy more than Rarity. Rarity brings up something called the stare, and wonders if that's why Opal likes Fluttershy more. The stare is said to be some strange talent that Fluttershy cannot control. Enter the other two members of the CMC. They're all excited because they're going to sleep over, and they even have a special chant to show it. Chris Savino, why do you hate me? Unfortunately, they can't have their sleepover because Sweetie Belle destroyed Rarity's supplies, and Rarity has to stay up all night to make more. So Fluttershy volunteers to take them in for the night. So yes, Sweetie Belle gets away with making Rarity's life harder. Okay then. The CMC are overjoyed. Please, stop that. On the way there, they run into Twilight, who is in another story she doesn't need to be. No, she's not as bad here as she was in Fall Weather Friends, because she's largely out of the main plot. We learn that she's going to the Everfree Forest to get some tea from Sakura. Well, there are worse excuses I've heard to go into the evil Forest of Doom. Fluttershy assumes that taking care of the CMC is going to be easy. It's not. They go wild as soon as they get to Fluttershy's house. The first thing they want to do is shout and run around for no apparent reason. Oh my god, they act just like real kids, so you can't complain about it, can you, Mr. Enter? Yes, I can, and yes, I will. Christopina, you've got the realism down. Kids can be annoying. But under no circumstances should you ever have a character annoy the audience. Speaking of annoying, Scootaloo wants to go adventuring in the Everfree Forest because she is either stupid or suicidal or both. Actually, they want to be... Please, just stop that! So, they play act catching a creature, and I must admit that it is kind of charming, especially because they aren't shouting. The charming stops when they break Fluttershy's table, and then they want to fix it. And they decide to rip off DuckTales. And fail. Horribly. Fluttershy tries to get them to calm down, and she fails. Horribly. They go crazy again. This time in Fluttershy's chimney. What is... Never mind. Finally, Fluttershy puts her hoof down and sends them off to bed. And like most kids, they don't want to go to bed. So Fluttershy decides to sing them a lullaby. This episode's song is... okay. Fluttershy's part is charming, but it's way too short. And Sweetie Belle's cover of it is... interesting. This isn't one in my music folder, if you know what I mean. The song does manage to spook the chickens, so the CMC teleport outside and try to catch them. Fluttershy manages to get control of the situation by using her special power, the stare. It's exactly what it sounds like. Fluttershy stares at animals, pheromone music starts, and they are compelled to do what she says. I'll voice my opinions about the stare at the end of the review. After the pheromone music dies down, Fluttershy herds the CMC back inside, and they go to bed like good little children. Then the CMC see that one of Fluttershy's chickens got loose, so they sneak past Fluttershy, who is talking to herself. They follow the trail of the missing chicken, and Scootaloo rips her cape on a fence post. And they follow the trail into the Everfree Forest. So they really are that stupid. Good to know. I already talked about this in my Bridle Gossip review, but it's worse here. Fluttershy flat out told them that there were dangerous creatures in the Everfree Forest. Later on, Fluttershy realizes that things have gotten too quiet, and she finds that the CMC are missing, as well as one of her chickens, and they've all gone into the Everfree Forest. Fluttershy now realizes that she's in over her head, but she does try to go after them. You'd better hurry, Fluttershy. They might decide that they want to be Cutie Mark cliff jumpers, or Cutie Mark breath holders if you don't find them soon enough. Scootaloo is a chicken joke while the three of them act oblivious to the world around them. Fluttershy, however, sees all of the dangers that they passed and gets scared by things that aren't there. Eventually, she comes across Twilight, who has been turned to stone. I'll talk about this later, too. Yeah, this episode gives me a lot to talk about. Finally, Fluttershy catches up to the CMC. She knows that there's a cockatrice on the loose, so she tries to get them out of the forest by telling them how dangerous it is.
There's a cockatrice on the loose. A what now? A cockatrice. It's a frightening creature with the head of a chicken and the body of a snake. Now, come on.
Or just by telling them what it looks like. This is my biggest problem with the episode. Fluttershy tells the CMC what the cockatrice looks like and just stops explaining right there. Fluttershy, I think you've forgotten one teensy tiny detail. A cockatrice can do this. She's not even interrupted by them running off. She just stops explaining what it is after she made it sound ridiculous. So the CMC run off trying to catch that silly creature. Fluttershy then tries to explain what it does. Fluttershy, that's the first thing you tell someone about a cockatrice, or a Medusa, or a basilisk. Who gives a buck what they look like until after you know you need to avoid it? The CMC chase the chicken and come across the cockatrice. Who doesn't look so ridiculous now? Oh, and it turns Fluttershy's chicken into stone. And the CMC come across Twilight, who has a snail running across her face. That's disgusting. And then they're screaming. So much screaming. The cockatrice comes, and Fluttershy takes a stance against it. When she sees that the CMC are in danger, she stares down the cockatrice. Yes, she actually stares down a creature that turns other creatures into stone by staring at them. I would be impressed by this if something similar didn't already happen in Dragonshy. The CMC say their sorries, Twilight is returned to normal because cockatrices can do that now, and every pony laughs. We end on a moral that you shouldn't bite off more than you can chew. And the CMC now have a respect for Fluttershy because they're either afraid of her, or she saved their lives, or something, I don't know. Before I talk about this episode, I'm going to talk about the concepts introduced within it. They give me reasons to not like this episode, but they don't give me reasons to give it a negative review. The first concept, the stare itself. I hate the stare. Fluttershy has been portrayed as kind, meek, timid, and having a special connection with animals. If she has such an intimidation tactic, then it undermines all of that. Then there's petrification, or someone getting turned into stone. Has anyone played either of the Baldur's Gate video games? If you haven't, you really should. They're good games. In it, if one of your characters dies, you're allowed to restore them to life with a scroll or by a priest, unless they have been turned to stone. If they have been turned to stone, they are beyond dead. Depending on how this works in Equestria, Twilight could have been dead for a brief time. She wasn't on my good side at this point, but that doesn't mean I wanted her to die. Applejack wasn't on my good side either, and I didn't like seeing her left for dead in the Everfree. Alright, time to review the episode itself. Firstly, congratulations, Chris. You've kept all the main characters in character. See, it isn't that hard, is it? No, his problem was with the CMC. Yes, they acted believable. They acted in character. They also acted believable and in character in Ponyville Confidential, where they didn't annoy the audience, and they didn't have that stupid shout. Oh yeah, the shout. Why? Why do they shout everything they do? It's not funny, it's not charming, it's not cute, it's annoying. The only other thing I have to complain about is Fluttershy not telling the CMC what the cockatrice does before she tells them what it looks like. Alright, time to stop bashing this episode. Apart from what I said, I found this to be a fairly enjoyable episode, story-wise at least. The humor was still non-existent, but at least Chris told an entertaining story, even if he had to resort to temporarily killing Twilight. I'm going to give this episode a silver, because Mr. Savino needs a nice parting gift. Yes, this is the last episode he wrote for the show. I don't know why he left, I don't care. Stairmaster was a decent episode, but they probably should have given a more experienced writer the first CMC episode. A writer like Cindy Morrow.
If you please, I am Dorothy, the small and meek.
I'm not looking forward to this one. This episode starts with Applejack leading the CMC to a run-down old shithole, which is apparently their new clubhouse. So this episode's going to be about them fixing it up, isn't it? No, this has almost nothing to do with the entirety of the episode. The main story starts when Scootaloo finishes drawing a map of Ponyville, and she dashes off, thoroughly convincing me that she is indeed suicidal. When she fails to get herself killed, she ends up at the CMC's clubhouse, which Applebloom fixed up all by herself. Then Applebloom comments on how good Scootaloo is doing tricks on her scooter. Then we see Sweetie Belle cleaning up while singing a nice tune. The three of them are totally oblivious to their talents, which have just been made blatantly obvious to the audience. Oh my god, did you seriously drop the ball already? 3 minutes in! I'm not going to tell you to remember this scene, because you will anyway. 3 seasons later, and I still do. They're even complimenting each other based on their talents! Sweetie Belle is working on the CMC theme song, and Applejack comes to check up on them. Sweetie Belle is a good singer. Scootaloo, not so much. The three of them are ready to go out into the world and find their special talent. Yes, we are forgetting Call of the Cutie. It never happened. So we have a montage where they try to figure out their talent. They start by feeding pigs, then they make taffy, then they try to do some hairdressing, then they try being psychics, then they try climbing a mountain, then they scuba dive in a lake. Of course nothing works because their talents are singing, construction, and acrobatics. This montage goes on for like 3 minutes, and it gets increasingly frustrating. It worked in Call of the Cutie because the montage didn't go on for more than a minute, and the attempts were so ridiculous that it came off as humorous. Here they're just doing mundane, boring things. They end up at Twilight's house, where she suggests telling them to do things that they like. Shirley is also there for some reason, and suggests that they try out for the school talent show. So they decide that this is the perfect opportunity to discover their talents. Girls, that's not how a talent show works. You're supposed... Oh, never mind. They go off on a tangent, claiming all of the off-the-wall things that they want to do for the show. Twilight interrupts them by saying that they're missing the point. Thank you, Twilight. Oh, by the way, missing the point is still not funny. Then Twilight repeats herself by telling them to do things they enjoy doing or what they're good at. If you excuse me, I'm gonna go bang my head against the wall now. So, Sweetie Belle steals a bunch of supplies from Rarity. See, Rarity? This is what kids do if you don't show them discipline. Then they go around collecting a bunch of random junk, per Sweetie Belle's instruction, and she has absolutely no idea what to do with them. They also take a book from Twilight about demons or something. It's not important. Apparently, they needed to do a song for the talent show. Oh, I get it. Sweetie Belle's gonna sing, Scootaloo is going to do some choreography, and Applebloom is gonna make the stage. Wow, you're a lot smarter than I give you Wait, that's not what happens at all, is it? No, Sweetie Belle wants to design the scenery, Scootaloo wants to do the singing, and Applebloom wants to do the choreography. They aren't good at it, in the slightest. But they do give each other pointers, which don't help them, in the slightest. This episode hurts me. Do they live in a different reality from me? Don't answer that. But can you please tell me, are they really that stupid? Are they? Yeah, they're kids, and that's just it. Even kids aren't this stupid. Applejack checks up on them and feels sort of the same way I do about this episode. Finally, we get to the talent show, and Snips and Snails are doing a magic show. Oh god, it's Boast Busters all over again. Go away! Go! Just go! Thank you. So the CMC wait for their turn, and oh god, what are they wearing? It looks like the 80s threw up. Twilight comes up and asks them how they're doing. Hey Twi, can you ask them if they sustained any brain damage lately? 'Cause I'm desperate to know. Twilight says that she can't wait for Sweetie Belle singing, and then it's revealed to her that Scootaloo is going to do the singing, and Twilight has the usual reaction that this episode gives to people. Oh yeah, this episode has a song, and it's off-key. I would say that this episode is lucky that songs don't factor into my final ranking, but I don't think I'm surprising anyone when I say that this episode isn't doing very well. Wait, why can't I hear anything? Oh, my ears are bleeding. I'll be back when the song is over. And it ends by the stage crashing and killing them. I'm just kidding, unfortunately. So they get laughed off the stage. I actually think boos are far more fitting, but it turns out that they get awarded the best comedy act, and then they decided that that might be their special talent. One problem though, that wasn't funny! Dear writers of Friendship is Magic, stop using dramatic irony, you're not good at it. When you do, you make your characters look like idiots, and you treat your audience like idiots. My god. This episode is the one that appears on everyone's worst of list. Why? Okay, I said that the episode dropped the ball 3 minutes in. That's when the audience learns what the CMC are good at. But the CMC either don't know, or don't care about what is blindingly obvious. This episode also has an accidental moral. Yeah, hi Polsky, I see you over there. This episode says that you should do something you're good at, even if you don't like it, or else everyone will think that you're an idiot. So if you're really good at scooping up shit, then that should be your life's ambition. Any humor this episode has was overshadowed by pure frustration. Even if the scene where we learned what the CMC are good at was removed, this episode just rehashes Call of the Cutie, and it does it so much worse. The only way that this episode could have worked is if they learned what their true talent was at the end. You know, I actually want to see an episode where they get their cutie marks. It could create plenty of drama, especially if one of them gets it first. Wow, I got a fanfiction to write. So did anything good come out of this episode? Anything at all? Yes, actually. It gave me the perfect reaction to it. Honestly, this right here, it sums up the whole episode perfectly. CMC missed the point? Headbang! Oh, and the background music, The Crusaders Go Crusading, was pretty good too. It's sad when an episode's only saving grace is a piece of background music. I'm keeping this, by the way. This episode starts with Fluttershy and Rarity getting together at a spa. Charlotte Fullerton, right? Wait, Megan McCarthy? Okay. Rarity is talking about a famous fashion designer named Photo Finish, who has agreed to see Rarity's outfits. Wait, didn't we already do this? Oh, in this one it's only Fluttershy who's going to be the model. That makes it totally different. It's season 1. Please don't start recycling plots. After some reluctance, Fluttershy agrees to help Rarity and model her clothes. See, they're even doing the ridiculous clothes thing again. Oh wait, this time it's Rarity who thinks it looks good. I see, totally different. Rarity is actually nervous, so it's probably likely that she wouldn't be working to her fullest abilities. Twilight, Pinkie, and Spike are helping out because Twilight is special. Pinkie is awesome, and Spike is a dragon. Oh, and he has a secret.
I have a crush on Rarity.
Jeez, Spike, don't tell us your PIN number. Oh, and we get our moral straight away.
Break. Every pony already knows how you... Twilight! You promised Spike you wouldn't say anything. He trusts you. And losing a friend's trust is the fastest way to lose a friend forever. But forever!
Photo Finish comes in. She takes some pictures of Fluttershy and likes to see her meek and timid instead of confident as Rarity instructed. After a few pictures, Photo Finish leaves without saying a word. Then she comes back and says that she's found the next special star in Ponyville and wants to help her shine, with another photo shoot in the park. I think you know where this is going. Oh yeah, Spike is the punching bag in this episode because Spike is a dragon. So, photo shoot, and then Photo Finish drops the bombshell. Fluttershy is the star she was talking about, not Rarity. Awkward. And then, surprisingly, Rarity encourages Fluttershy to become a model for her. Her friends come and check up on her and see that she's depressed. Again. Fluttershy isn't doing much better. It's really easy to see that she isn't happy about being in the spotlight, but she is doing this for Rarity. She catches a lot of attention and becomes famous really quickly though. Okay then, defeating Nightmare Moon doesn't get you anything, getting a few photos taken and every pony knows your name. If it adds conflict. Fluttershy, not liking all this attention, talks to Rarity, and they tell each other that they're doing wonderfully. But it's incredibly easy to see that they aren't. And it actually starts to get on Rarity's nerves. Fluttershy is having more trouble as well. Rarity is at the spa waiting for Fluttershy, who is running really late. Twilight shows up and hears that Rarity wants Fluttershy's star to burn out. Rarity is incredibly jealous, and has Twilight promise not to tell Fluttershy, and Pinkie Pie pops out of nowhere. Fluttershy comes in and tells Twilight how frustrated she is, and how she hates being a model, but gets Twilight to promise that she isn't allowed to say anything to Rarity.
Never.
Do you see the problem here? Oh, and Pinkie Pie won't let Twilight tell the truth because... potatoes, okay? Potatoes. When something doesn't make sense in this episode, it's all because of potatoes. Twilight takes the next best option and tries to get Fluttershy to quit, with Pinkie Pie stalking her all the way. I am scared now. Twilight gets the idea to make Fluttershy fail and tells Pinkie Pie her plan, because it would be very awkward if she was talking to herself. More awkward than it is anyway. Twilight makes Fluttershy do some very ungraceful things. But surprise, surprise, Rarity shows up. The things that Fluttershy does is actually kind of funny, and it has the desired effect on the audience. Except to Rarity, who applauds Fluttershy, and then gets the crowd to applaud Fluttershy. Then we cut to the dressing room where Rarity goes to check up on Fluttershy, and they are still lying to each other. Twilight knows the truth, but keeps trying to hide their secret. But then Rarity and Fluttershy admit their secret, and then we learn that you should tell your friends how you feel about things. And Twilight admits that Spike has a crush on Rarity.
And you are doing so well.
Did you ever see something you wanted to hate but couldn't? I wanted to hate this episode from the premise alone, but it did it surprisingly well. Jealousy stories are as old as Cain and Abel, but there were a few unique takes on it in this episode, like the fact that Rarity and Fluttershy reached their own conclusions and told the truth on their own by the end of the episode. And that brings me to Twilight. Twilight, what were you doing in this episode? Honestly, if you weren't here, what would have changed? I'll tell you, it would have been a lot less frustrating knowing that you had the power to solve a problem, but didn't use it. Twilight, I like you, but some stories don't need you. This was one of them, and because of you, and you alone, you've demoted this episode to a silver. Not bad, but without Twilight, this episode could have been better.
Mental, that one, I'm telling you.
This episode starts with the main six riding a train, being pulled by ponies for some odd reason. And Applejack is reading to a tree. Okay. Apparently they're going to be taking the tree, named Bloomberg, to be replanted in an apple orchard in a place called Appaloosa. I gotta say, this is an interesting way to get across your exposition. It's gonna be one of those episodes, isn't it? It becomes nighttime and Rarity's trying to get some sleep, but the rest of the main six are talking up a storm. After Spike gets annoyed with them, Twilight decides to turn off the lights, but none of the others could sleep. Probably because they're high. No, really, they're high. Whatever they're smoking, I want some. Spike just wants to get some rest, so he goes to sleep with Bloomberg in the caboose.
Well, that was kind of Huffy. Huffy the magic dragon.
Can I have some, please?
Oh, be quiet now!
Okay, sorry I asked. In the morning, something causes the train to jostle. It's a buffalo stampede, and they try to take the train down, causing the main six to tumble around the car. The buffaloes stack on top of each other, and the smallest one, who reminds me of Bambi, hops onto the roof of the train. She's heading towards the caboose, so Rainbow Dash tries to stop her, and fails. Twice. Bambi unlocks the caboose, and the buffalo take the car away with Spike and Bloomberg. And everyone leaves Rainbow Dash in the dust, who now has a headache. Hey, as long as ponies aren't puking, I'm not complaining. The train arrives in Appaloosa, and we are introduced to Brayburn. Thanks for the drugs, guys. This is gonna be one interesting trip. Applejack eventually manages to interrupt Brayburn and tell him that the caboose, Spike, Rainbow Dash, Bloomberg, and for some reason Pinkie Pie have all gone missing. Then we learn that the buffalo want all of the trees off the Appaloosa orchard, and that's why they took the tree. But the settlers can't get rid of the trees because they need the apples to survive. We're doing the racism thing again, huh? Well, good luck, Mr. Polsky. Wait, Polsky? The Pinkie Keen guy? Oh boy. Rainbow Dash runs into Pinkie Pie in the middle of the desert, and for some reason Pinkie has become a complete idiot. And that gets them both caught by the buffalo, who are now good friends with Spike.
What's up? Hey, no worries, I know those guys. They're cool.
Oh, so now he's high. This episode is weird. That night, Pinkie and Rainbow Dash are being taken in by the buffalo. We learn that the buffalo only wanted to take the tree, not Spike, so they honor him and his friends. And for some reason, the buffalo have access to gemstones. Oh, and Rainbow sees Bambi. Yes, we now know her actual name, but I'm going to keep calling her Bambi. Rainbow tries to leave, but Bambi apologizes. We now learn that the settler ponies have taken the buffalo's land and planted the orchard on it. Oh my god, I must be high. They're doing it right. Rainbow and Pinkie talk to the chief of the buffalo. Apparently, that land that the settler ponies took was used by the buffalo for the sacred tradition of stampeding. Alright, not the strongest motivation, but I'll buy it. Rainbow Dash and Pinkie side with the buffalo and agree to talk with the settler ponies. Meanwhile, in Appaloosa, their friends are ready to send out the search party, but almost instantly run into Pinkie, Dash, and Spike. Bambi and Brayburn try to talk about compromise, but Rainbow and Applejack are too set in their beliefs. Polsky, I know they're stubborn, but you're pushing it here. Twilight breaks up the argument, and we learn that Pinkie has an idea. I'm already down the rabbit hole, I don't need any of Pinkie's weirdness. But it looks like Pinkie's weirdness I'm gonna get with this episode's song. This song is... What the fuck? What am I looking at here? It's just, what? There are no words to describe this, except for maybe...
That was the worst performance we've ever seen.
I know it was weird, but it wasn't, bad. So the chief tells the sheriff that if the orchard is still there the next day, the buffalo will flatten it. And then the whole town as well. Bambi and Brayburn try to get their attention, but they fail. So the citizens of Appaloosa start fortifying the town, while the main six try to get them to find a way to compromise. The citizens are too busy gathering apples and building bombardments and making pies. What? Making pies? Rainbow Dash tries to get the chief to not go through with this, but he sees attack as the only option. High noon the next day, everyone is ready to begin the fight. The bells from the clock tower ring, and the chief decides not to go through with it until...
You gotta share, you gotta care.
And the buffalo charge. The settlers defend themselves by throwing pies. There's other stuff too that makes the fight actually entertaining, but pies? And one nails the chief in the face, causing him to fall. Is he dead? Hey, the rest of this episode is so surreal that I believe that a pie to the face killed him. But no, he didn't die. Some of the apple pie falls on his tongue, and he loves it. And they actually come to a compromise. A path through the orchard is cut down so the buffalo can stampede through, as long as they get some apple pies. And Bloomberg gets planted in the orchard. This episode was definitely trying to go for a spaghetti western theme, but in my opinion, it firmly tackled Alice in Wonderland. Everything about this episode is just bizarre, from the dialogue to the humor to the imagery. But weirdness isn't a bad thing. It actually makes it uniquely entertaining, and it gives an effect that no other episode has. I actually do believe that Dave Polsky was high when he wrote this episode. I mean, how else could he get the moral this correct? The disagreement between the settler ponies and the buffaloes was completely believable, and this episode beats Bridle Gossip by a mile because we actually see that neither side is evil or even unjustified. It's just a misunderstanding that came about through a lack of communication. So I have to ask, why do people hate this episode? Yeah, some people really hate this episode. I've seen it on plenty of worst of lists, and from what I can tell, there are two reasons for it. Number one was the anticlimax, the fight scene where they use pies instead of weapons. My response to that is, firstly, some buffalo did get hurt, and secondly, this is a show for children. What did you expect? Something out of Gladiator? Besides, being overdramatic about the chief's death was pretty damn funny. The other reason is Pinkie Pie. In this episode, she was a complete idiot and blind to the obvious. Even getting the buffalo to stampede at the end because... potatoes. I wish I could say that it didn't detract anything from this episode, but it did. If Pinkie didn't act like an idiot and didn't, this episode gets a silver, This episode starts with Fluttershy taking care of an animal friend. I'll be right back, I need to give my computer another shot of penicillin. Angel comes in and tries to tell Fluttershy that she's late.
For a very important date.
Pop culture reference. Awesome. Wait, why are the dresses at Fluttershy's? Never mind. She manages to leave. Eventually. Meanwhile, Rainbow Dash is trying to get Celestia's royal guards to move.
Is the pay good? Hello? Anybody home?
I've seen this gag before. A lot. And I don't remember it ever being funny.
Ooh, you're good. Too good. I'm bored.
Me too. Fluttershy, however, can't get past the guards until Twilight lets her in. Spike seems to be baking up some pastries for the party while the cakes are serving them to the princess. They're obviously a little nervous about hosting a party like this, but if any pony is more nervous than them, it's Twilight. Twilight wants Celestia to like all of her friends, who aren't exactly enjoying the party. Wait, is that a ham sandwich? I thought the ponies were vegetarians. At least Pinkie is enjoying herself. A little too much. Yay, a joke that actually works! Or it would if they didn't replay Pinkie's gasp from the first episode. We learn that Celestia is a little bit of a prankster. You could have fooled me. For her next trick, she shows Fluttershy a bird that looks like it's ready to be put out of its misery. All the while, she's talking about how she just loves animals. This bird is Philomena, and Celestia is forced away before she can explain what the bird is, why it's in such a condition, and how they can avoid this whole episode. And then the bird goes missing. 3 guesses and the first 2 don't count. That's right, Fluttershy stole the bird. But she does have good intentions, which makes thievery A-OK. She wants to help it get better, and she keeps talking about how she wants to help it get better. Alright, since this episode doesn't want to get started, let's talk about that bird. It's disgusting. You should never, ever make something disgusting the focal part of an episode, for obvious reasons. But for what it's worth, it could have been a lot worse. Then we begin the shenanigans of Fluttershy trying to cure that bird. It starts with her trying to give it bed rest, but that delves into an interesting gag that's almost funny. Fluttershy tries to give it medicine, but the bird doesn't go for it, until...
I expected that. Always works.
Hey, only Pinkie's allowed to do that. Then Fluttershy tries soup, but the bird is too stubborn. And then this happens. Once again, it's almost funny. So Fluttershy tries to cheer up Philomena by singing, and the bird responds by puking in her face. Ew. Fluttershy turns her bathroom into a sauna, and when it seems like the bird is about to be cured, we get the creepiest Fluttershy face I've ever seen. The sauna doesn't work, and the bird starts losing feathers. Fluttershy then tries other means to cure the bird. They don't work, and come off as disgusting more often than not. And bird with tape is even more disgusting. Twilight comes by for what she makes apparent as no real reason at all.
Hi, Fluttershy. I just wanted to drop by and say thank you so very much for making such a good impression on the princess today.
Charlotte Fullerton, this is what we call shoehorning. Don't do it. Ever. She notices that Celestia's pet is with Fluttershy, and she understandably freaks out about it. Then they argue in a gag that goes on for a bit too long. They eventually decide to return the bird to Celestia, until they get confronted by the royal guards just outside of Fluttershy's cottage. They tell us what we already know, and Twilight tries to get them to leave in a couple of other gags that don't quite pan out. But now Twilight knows that they can't return the bird because the guards are looking for it, and they can get in big trouble if Celestia finds out that one of them took her pet.
She might banish you from Equestria, or throw you in a dungeon. Or banish you and then throw you in a dungeon in the place that she banishes you to.
Nah, she'd never do that. Fluttershy tells Twilight they need to cure the... Oh, never, ever do something like that again. Ever! So, Twilight forces the bird to eat the medicine, and puts a cone on her, and then puts her under a shade to get some bed rest. Then Twilight discovers the soup, and gets surprisingly sadistic, as she tries to force the soup down the bird's throat, and they're surprised when the bird gets out. Then we do the Benny Hill thing again. It's a bit funnier than the one they used in the Ticketmaster, but that brings me to my next point. You already did this gag. All throughout this episode, you've been using very cliched jokes and gags that have been done and done better on other shows, and now you are rehashing yourself. Speaking of jokes that don't pan out, Rainbow Dash sees that Fluttershy and Twilight are running, and thinks that they're running a race, for no reason whatsoever. They eventually come to the bird, who is standing on top of a fountain in the center of town. Fluttershy tries to call it down, but when it loses its last feather, it dies. Over dramatically. That's dark. Fluttershy tries to catch it, but it bursts into flame, and it makes her cry. I'm going to save my outrage for this bird in just a minute. Celestia comes in, and Twilight tells her that the bird is dead. And Twilight and Fluttershy fight each other for the blame. Eventually, Fluttershy wins the fight and admits that she took the bird in order to try to get it healed. Celestia sadly looks at the pile of ash, and then says that it's fooling around. Then the pile of ash turns into a bright, flaming phoenix. And the bird had Fluttershy going all this time for a nice little prank. If you've seen Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, this twist wouldn't surprise you. Otherwise, this is a major punch to the face. All of the trouble that Fluttershy went through happened because some dumb damn bird was bored.
So, aren't you gonna banish me? Or throw me in a dungeon? Or banish me then throw me in a dungeon in the place that you banished me to?
Of course not, my little pony. Where on earth would you get such an idea?
I had no idea. But no, we learned that if Fluttershy asked if the bird was a phoenix, this whole thing could have been avoided. Or you know, if Twilight asked in all those years that she studied under Celestia as her own personal student. I'm going to start out by saying that I abhor gross-out humor. So for all intents and purposes, I should hate this episode. I do, but not for that reason. The humor is actually pretty meh. Probably because the gross-out humor fails. Usually when gross-out humor fails, it's because they forgot the humor. Here, it fails because the animation style looks too nice and clean. They cannot make anything look truly disgusting, and that is a relief. The rest of the humor in this episode is somewhere around meh, and that's generally the consensus. Everyone considers this episode pretty meh, and I'll tell you why. Almost none of the gags pan out because we've seen them so many times before. They pretty much become cliched at this point. I mean, we've seen the British Guard stuff, we've seen the pies of the face, and we've obviously seen the Benny Hill skit because they've already used it. Two things drag this episode down to the hate category. One is the fact that Twilight had no idea what her mentor's pet was. I mean, in all those years, you never asked what your mentor's pet was. You've never even seen it in its full glory. The other is that ending. It makes me really mad with the treatment Fluttershy gets in this episode because that bird thought it would be funny.
No hard feelings.
You represent the element of kindness. I don't. So I don't have to forgive that bird until it's roasting on a spit.
Are you telling me that this sucker is nuclear?
This episode starts with the Cutie Mark Crusaders trying to get their cutie marks. Again. And they fail. Again. At least they're mixing it up. Scootaloo suggests they ask the coolest pony in town.
Applejack! Rarity!
That's actually pretty touching. But no, the answer is Rainbow Dash. They're going to ask her how she got her cutie mark. But they can't do much without screwing up, can they? They run into Applejack, and since they're already there, they ask her how she got her cutie mark. If you haven't guessed, we're going to learn the backstories of the main six. This is definitely an important episode, so let's see how they do. In Applejack's backstory, she decides that she doesn't want to live on the farm, so she goes to live in the city with her aunt and Uncle Orange. It's pretty much half the classic tale of the city and the country mouse. She tries to fit in, and she actually does a good job, until she mentions roosters. It becomes clear that she's not happy here. One morning, during the sunrise, Applejack is reminiscing about home when she sees a rainbow pointing towards Ponyville, her home, and she runs home. And then she got her cutie mark, and she chases after some bunnies. The CMC decide that that story wasn't good enough and continue on their quest to find Rainbow Dash, and they run into Fluttershy instead. So we cut back to summer flight camp.
You'd never guess, but when I was little, I was very shy.
Wow, you learn something new every day. She was really bad at flying and really badly bullied. But Rainbow Dash comes to defend Fluttershy, which leads to a race. When the race begins, Fluttershy gets knocked off the cloud and falls to the ground. And she gets saved by butterflies, which inspires her to sing this episode's song, So Many Wonders. Insulin! I need insulin! Okay, but seriously, I generally don't like songs with a genre change in the middle. But other than that, this song I find fine. There's an explosion in the sky, which you can clearly see as a sonic rainboom, and the animals go running for cover. Fluttershy sees this and manages to convince them all to come out of hiding, and she learns that she has the ability to communicate with animals on a different level, which is her special talent. The CMC, still not satisfied, go off to find Rainbow Dash once more, and they end up modeling for Rarity. I think you know where this is going. In Rarity's backstory, she's making costumes for the school play, when her horn somehow gets a mind of its own and starts dragging her to hell and back. I like where this is going. Actually, it eventually leads her to a boulder.
It's not just a boulder. It's a rock.
A rock? That's my destiny?
Then the Rainbow Ex Machina breaks the boulder and Rarity finds that it's full of gems, and she uses it to decorate the play's costumes. A bit much, but it gets Rarity her cutie mark. They escape the store and bump into Twilight. In Twilight's past, she went to the Canterlot Summer Sun celebration when she first sees Princess Celestia raise the sun. It inspires her to learn magic, and as time goes on, she gets better and better at it. Her parents enroll her in a magic school. Sure, why not? But in order for her to get into this magic school, she needs to pass an entrance exam. This exam is hatching a dragon egg with magic, and Twilight's not very good at it. They really expect the child to hatch an actual dragon egg. Speaking of that, I don't think the parents are happy that you stole their egg. Twilight thinks that she failed. Boom! Twilight goes into the Avatar state and wreaks havoc on everything. And it is awesome! It's so awesome that Princess Celestia herself comes in to check up on the magical explosions. And Princess Celestia decides to make Twilight become her own personal student. And that gets Twilight her cutie mark, not the insane magic stuff. Considering that there's only 2 of the main 6 left and they're searching for Rainbow Dash, the plot dictates Pinkie is next. Yep, so they learn that Pinkie was raised on a rock farm outside of Ponyville. That is oddly hilarious.
There was no smiling. There were only rocks.
Or not. One day, there's a rainbow in the sky, and Pinkie goes poof. She feels happy, and she wants everyone she knows to be happy too. So the next morning, oh no, she brought the Parasprites back. Run, Pinkie's family, they're going to eat everything you care about! No, it actually turns out to be a party, and it ends up making her family smile, which makes Pinkie happy, and gets her cutie mark.
And that's how Equestria was made.
I love your logic. Inside Sugar Cube Corner, they find Rainbow Dash, along with the rest of the main 6. Final backstory time. It begins at the race. Remember the one from before? Yeah, that race. So the racers knock Fluttershy to the ground and fly through rings. Rainbow goes faster and faster as she learns that she loves racing and she loves winning. And then she creates her very first Sonic Rainboom. That is actually very touching. This is one of those episodes that I can find pretty much nothing wrong with. Okay, that's not totally true. The moral is a little out there and doesn't really pertain to the real world, which is why I didn't bring it up. But other than that, there isn't much. Yes, the ending is a little contrived and a little sappy, but it is really touching. And if you can't stand sappiness, why are you watching this show? This was an episode that a lot of people obviously wanted to see, and it did not disappoint. We didn't just learn about the main six's backstories, they were each given their own flavor. And to be honest, the designs of the Philly main six are really adorable. It was all tied together by humor and the CMC not being annoying for once. They're still not fully redeemed by me yet, but they didn't stop this episode from getting a gold. It's honestly one of the best of Season 1. Top 3, easily. This episode starts with Spike and Twilight getting ready for a meteor shower. We are given some direct insight to Twilight and Spike's relationship, and yes, it is endearing to know that Spike is willingly doing all of this. Before they leave, Twilight asks Spike to fetch a book. Unfortunately, the dust causes him to sneeze fire and burn the book, so he lies and says that he can't find it. They get to the meteor shower place, and every pony else starts fawning over Spike. Cinemaro, I know what you're trying to do here with contrast and all, but from my end, this attention seems to be coming out of nowhere. Build up to these kind of things, or at the very least, don't hammer it in so much. And Spike falls asleep, and yes, we get that Spike punch joke. Later that night, Twilight puts Spike to bed and starts writing a report on comets when she hears something. She goes out to check on it, and ends up leaving the door open. Then, seeing a shadow, she opens the window, and the wind blows out her paper. Suddenly, Twilight has become a coward, claiming that searching the shadows is a job for Spike. Twilight, we've seen you deal with all kinds of monsters. It isn't like you to be afraid of the dark. All of the creepy, I guess, stuff was caused by an owl who brought Twilight's paper back. Hey kids, if you ever see a wild owl in your house, you should probably call an exterminator, because they do carry diseases. Twilight doesn't seem to consider that, so she offers to let the owl stay, because of one simple act of kindness. The next morning, Spike has slept in, but he learns that the owl, now named Owlicious, has done all of his morning chores. Speaking of Spike, he doesn't really want any help from this junior assistant. Twilight doesn't really seem to care, and she's off so her two indentured servants, assistants, can get to know each other. And Spike becomes completely paranoid about the owl taking his job because potatoes. Yes, Cindy Morrow, you made it clear he doesn't like the owl. Now you need to make it clear why.
Number 1, not freaky feathers over there.
No one said you weren't. Not yet, anyway. Stop trying to make the owl creepy! There's no point to it! Spike is reading up on owls, and he sees everyone else fawning over Owlicious. This is the episode's killing blow. Every pony says the same thing they said about Spike during the meteor shower. They've known Spike for what, a year? At least? This is the first time they've ever seen the owl. Ever!
Such a star! I just had to make this little bow for you.
You've never seen him before. I must also make it known that Rarity only gave the bow to Owlicious after Spike made himself known. And Spike realizes the whole stupidity of the situation and stops watching them. Rainbow suggests that Spike is jealous, and Fluttershy suggests that Spike is worried or threatened. Here's an idea. Just one teensy tiny little sentiment to stop me from believing you're both idiots. If you're worried about him, console him, or stop putting that owl on an equal pedestal to one of your friends.
Replace him? Ha! That's crazy. Spike knows he can't be replaced.
Or he should know. Spike is rambling on to himself while Twilight comes in with the owl riding on her back. Twilight asks Spike to find a book, but the owl gets it before he can. And I just realized something. Shouldn't Owlicious be sleeping? I mean, owls are nocturnal, and in the last scene we saw that it was clearly day. Oh no, he can't do that. We have to abandon logic just to make Spike as jealous as possible. And they do that. Later, Twilight breaks a quill, and Spike can't find one anywhere in the library. Considering that there's a bird in the house, you know where this is going. Spike goes all over Ponyville looking for a quill. And when he gets back, he finds that Owlicious let Twilight have one of his feathers. Never mind, that's not how writing quills work at all.
I was calling out for you when you were turning this place upside down. Aloysius gave me one of his feathers to use as a quill.
And you just let him go on anyway? You didn't even send the owl to bring him back? It gets Spike to snap, which I'm thoroughly convinced is the only thing that Cindy Morrow cares about at this point. I just realized something about Twilight's character. It's incredibly delicate. If she's even the least bit stupid, she comes off as incredibly annoying. You should be astute enough to realize that Twilight is going through something. After all, he lives with you, and you should know how he acts when he's upset.
Delicious found it right where it belongs.
Of course he did. So Twilight confronts Spike, and Spike weasels out the truth. Twilight ends up being very disappointed in Spike. You know what, Twilight? I'm glad your book got burnt. I'll burn down your whole damn house if I'll get you to notice something. Spike assumes that Owlicious set him up, and Spike wants to teach Owlicious a lesson, and he sees a field mouse, giving him an idea. And he dons a top hat, evil mustache, and a cape. If you're going to vilify a character, be a little more subtle about it. So, Spike steals a cat toy from Rarity and monologues about his plan. Is talking to yourself a common occurrence in Equestria? There is no need to explain this. We know Spike's intention, and we see what he's going to do. Spike tears at the mouse, covers it in ketchup, and acts like an idiot so he gets caught by Twilight. He didn't have to tell us anything, except maybe how he thought that this was going to work, considering the fact that I haven't seen the owl leave Twilight's back.
I also don't know what upsets me more. That you deliberately tried to set up Aloysius, or that you actually thought this pathetic attempt would work?
Oh, so now you can notice the obvious. I'm trying to cut back on these, but I have to use it. And stop trying to make the owl creepy. It's not working. No, I have no idea what you're trying to do with it, but whatever it is, it's not working.
She doesn't love me anymore.
Clearly not as much as she loves that owl. So Spike runs away, uses another overused joke.
Could it get any worse?
And hides in a cave. And he comes across a treasure trove. Wow, you are a dumbass. I mean, everyone's been a dumbass this entire episode, but you really take the cake if you expect the cave full of treasure to not be guarded by something, like, say, another dragon. Yep, the dragon's pissed. Really pissed. So Spike turns tail and runs, but gets cornered, only to be saved by your lord and savior, Owlicious. So the owl, with no combat training, can go toe-to-toe with a full-grown dragon. Twilight gets Spike's attention and they run out of the cave, and they charge out of the forest. And once again, the owl manages to come in handy, as it can see in the dark. Don't unicorns have illumination magic? If Tweedledum can manage it, I'm sure you can. But no, they have to make the owl as unbelievably awesome as possible. To be honest though, this climax is one of the episode's few redeeming factors.
It's just that sometimes I need some help at night.
Except Owlicious was helping you during the day, consistently.
Owls are nocturnal, so I asked Aloysius to help.
Once again, except for the beginning and the end, this episode has been completely during the day.
I should have been more sensitive.
Or, you know, not blind to the obvious.
Forgive me? Who? Me. Forgive me, Spike.
That's not funny.
How did you guys know where I was?
It was your ketchup-covered feet.
Bullshit. It was raining. Ketchup washes away in water, especially in mud. Take a guess what the moral is. Don't be a jealous prick. If it wasn't obvious enough, Spike's first outing was one of his worst. Cindy Morrow, I understand what you were trying to do. Just like I understand you were going for the so bad it's good feel in Showstoppers. You tried to make this episode completely from Spike's point of view, and just like before, you failed this time too. First of all, if that was your intention, you didn't telegraph it good enough. From where I stand, each of the main six look like bigger pricks than Spike does, especially Twilight and Rarity. Yes, Rarity, and she only got 3 lines in the entire episode. This episode was just incredibly mean. All the main six fawned over Owlicious at first sight, which makes it seem like their affections are petty, as in a friendship that you do not want. And let's bring up logic. In cartoons, you're allowed to get away with some suspension of disbelief. There's some things I can buy and some things I can't, especially if you bring up the fallacies yourself. What was that again?
It's just that sometimes I need some help at night.
Yeah, except almost the entire episode took place during the day, which makes it seem like you really are trying to replace Spike. This is 2 failures in a row, Cindy Morrow. I know you're good at this writing thing. Just stop doing these gimmicks and tell a story from a neutral point of view. You're best when you do it that way. This episode starts with a song. Pinkie Pie invites every pony to her alligator's birthday party while singing her Telegram song. It's nice and it ends with a funny joke, but I really don't have much else to say about it. Actually, I like her friends' reactions to it more than the song itself. Just look at Rainbow's face. Actually, just look at any of their faces. We cut to the party where we see Rainbow Dash and Applejack bobbing for apples. Pinkie tells them that there are surprises in the bucket, which turn out to be an apple hooked to a spring and Gummy. Pinkie gives Rarity some punch, and Rarity learns that Gummy has been swimming in it. Then the music comes on, and Pinkie bumps Twilight and Fluttershy into the wall. I must say, Pinkie's parties are interesting. Later that night, every pony else leaves, with Pinkie trying to get Twilight to stay longer. No comment. Twilight says that she has to go home, but that they should have another party again soon. And by soon, Pinkie decides that that means tomorrow. Early the next morning, Pinkie invites Twilight to another party this afternoon. Of course, since no one wants to go to a party 2 days in a row, Twilight makes up an excuse. Pinkie invites Applejack, who also comes up with an excuse. It's actually kind of funny watching Applejack's pathetic attempts at lying. Next up is Rarity, who is having Spike take out her garbage. Yeah, the little guy doesn't ever get a break. Pinkie comes onto the scene, and Rarity makes up an excuse. Or tries to. That is hilarious. As is Rainbow and Fluttershy's excuses. If it's not completely obvious, I really like this episode. The humor is just top-notch, as it is in most Pinkie Pie episodes. Speaking of Pinkie, she starts to become suspicious of her friends, and she believes that Rainbow and Fluttershy's excuse was the most believable. And then she comes to the conclusion that her friends might have been ditching her. Then Pinkie sees Twilight sneaking around going into Sugar Cube Corner. Twilight talks to Mrs. Cake and claims that she needs something and doesn't want Pinkie to know about this. Considering that this is a bakery, you already know the end result of this episode. Oh, and Pinkie drops down a tin can to listen in. That's it. I'm convinced. Twilight needs glasses. That explains everything. All that reading puts such a heavy strain on her eyes that she can't see shit without her glasses. But she doesn't wear them because she's incredibly self-conscious. It doesn't excuse the frustration she gave me, but at least it's an explanation. Of course, Twilight manages to see the can eventually, and this happens. This episode is really funny. Pinkie follows Twilight and dons some Groucho glasses because she's Pinkie Pie. She doesn't need an explanation. So Twilight passes the box she was carrying to Rarity, and Pinkie follows along, now in a bale of hay with a baseball cap and a trench coat. Who comes up with this stuff? Rarity passes the box off to Fluttershy, and they keep talking about how they're glad they could come up with excuses about not going to Pinkie's party. They say how awesome their plans are, as long as they keep Pinkie Pie from finding out about it. Then Pinkie bumps into Fluttershy, and it spooks her, so she dashes away with the box. Rainbow Dash comes by and instantly knows that Pinkie is hiding in the hay bale. So she runs off and Pinkie follows Rainbow Dash all throughout Ponyville. Remember when I complained about a bird in the Hoof for using a gag? This is how you do it properly. Number 1, you make it better. And number 2, you change the context of the joke to keep it fresh and unique. Both criteria are met here. Rainbow manages to get to Applejack's barn and pawns an irate Pinkie off to her. Once again, Applejack trying to lie is amusing as all hell. A lot of people complain about this, with Applejack representing the element of honesty and all, but I don't. First of all the others have failed to live up to their elements. Secondly, she's really bad at it, which makes it really funny. And third, she's kinda telling the truth. They are doing construction in there. The facial expressions really sell this scene, though. Pinkie doesn't exactly buy it, but she goes away. Sort of. Can I be scared of Pinkie now? Between this episode and Green Isn't Your Color, she's coming off as incredibly disturbing. Speaking of disturbing, Pinkie traps Spike in a chair and tries to get him to admit what their friend's plan is. This joke goes on for quite a while, but the dialogue between the two makes it all the worthwhile. Oh, and this expression makes the entire episode.
What do you want to hear? Tell me that my friends are all lying to me and avoiding me because they don't like my parties and they don't want to be my friends anymore!
Your friends are all lying to you and avoiding you because they don't like your parties and they don't want to be your friends anymore!
Yeah, that's Pinkie logic for you. Hey, Spike, you're not going to tell her that that's not the truth, are you? No? Oh, good, at least Pinkie's smiling. What the fuck? Is she okay? No, she's not okay. Not okay whatsoever. This is disturbing. And Rainbow Dash shows up. Of course she does. No, we are not talking about that! Rainbow Dash tries to get Pinkie Pie out of there and down to Sweet Apple Acres, and yes, it's another very humorous scene, despite the... Yeah. So Rainbow drags Pinkie all the way down to Sweet Apple Acres, and every pony else shouts surprise. Pinkie assumes that it's her farewell party, but it's actually a surprise party. Yep, it's Pinkie's surprise birthday party, and when Pinkie realizes this, she returns to normal. The moral.
Always expect the best from your friends, and never assume the worst. Rest assured that a good friend always has your best interests at heart. Your faithful student, Twilight Sparkle.
I'm not going into too much detail here, but I do believe that the moral could have been worded a little better. I have no problem with the latter part. You should never assume the worst of your friends, but always assuming the best, while ideal, isn't realistic. You might have good friends, but sometimes their plans may not be best for you, whether their intentions are good or not. It's not a bad moral, you should trust your friends, but like I said, it could have been worded a bit better. As for this episode, I love it. I mean, how could I not? The humor is amazing, almost every joke hits its mark, the facial expressions are just ingenious, and not to mention Pinkie's party is one of the most WTF things I've ever seen. And I played LSD Dream Emulator. I mean, I've seen this episode dozens of times, and that let me see some of the flaws. This is by no means a perfect episode. It has plenty of issues. Problem 1 is the ending. Forgetting your own birthday in kid shows is cliche enough, but it's a really hard sell that Pinkie Pie, the party extraordinaire, would forget her own. I mean, I can buy it, considering that she thought that this was a viable disguise, but I'm overpaying. A lot. That brings me to the plot. It's very predictable. I don't really hold that against things, although I realize that it might turn some people off. Here's my philosophy. I don't care how it ends, if you make the ride fun enough. And this ride was really fun. Besides, an obvious ending is much better than a bad ending. And then there's the minor gripe with Spike not noticing Pinkie deflating right in front of him. It's short, but yeah, it kinda paints him in a bad light. But despite all of these flaws, I'm still giving this episode a gold. What this episode gets right, it really gets right. And what it gets wrong doesn't detract from it, unlike the moral in Pinkie Keen. I find this episode brilliant, and it's one of my favorites. It starts with Pinkie Pie jumping up and down. Both Twilight and Rarity scold her. Rarity doesn't want Pinkie sweaty, and Twilight is trying to do this. Then she turns Fluttershy's mice into abominations of evil, which run off when Opal chases them. Twilight then claims that they now need horses. I have no comment. It turns out that those horses happen to be Rarity's neighbors. So the main six get ready, and we get some more meta humor. Even Spice is excited about this, but the others claim that they're going to be doing their own thing at the party. That downs his mood a little bit, but Twilight says that they will get to spend some time together. So they're off, with Spike driving the carriage. Does he know how to drive? Oh wait, those are sentient horses. Wait, then why do they need a driver? Oh yeah, Spike never gets a break. And when they finally get to Canterlot, he opens the door for them. And we see that they're all suited up in their dresses from Suited for Success. They're so overjoyed to be here that they sing this episode's song, At the Gala. Alright, everyone loves this song. I don't know anyone who dislikes it. After all, this is the first song where each of the main six gets a large part. Yeah, there was Winter Wrap-Up, but that was more of a Twilight song with an ensemble helping. I say that I don't like it when a song changes genre midway through, but it works here. I don't really know why. Maybe it's because it goes back and forth 6 times, or maybe it's because Daniel Ingram is just a fucking genius. As for what the song does, it reminds us of what happened during the Ticketmaster, with one exception. The writers realized that it would have made Rainbow seem like an asshole if she tried to upstage the Wonderbolts, so they changed her plan to getting some FaceTime with them. Nice save. And they're off. Twilight goes to Celestia and tries to spend some time with her. I guess her definition of time together is standing next to each other greeting people you don't know. Rarity sees her prince and chases after him. Meanwhile, Fluttershy chases a bird off and hears it singing. She responds in kind and runs off. Applejack opens up her stand, and as soon as she does, she sells a pie to one of the Wonderbolts. He nearly drops it, but it's saved by Rainbow Dash. Spitfire sees this deed, and recognizes her from the Best Young Flyers competition, and then Spitfire invites her to spend some time with the Wonderbolts. Pinkie Pie is just happy to be at the party, so here she sings the episode's second song. Sort of. Any song would pale in comparison to At the Gala, so this one's extremely short, and it just serves to get the other ponies annoyed with her. And it works! Rarity meets her prince, Blue Blood, and he turns out to not be as charming as Rarity thought he would be. Fluttershy finds the singing was caused by the gardener, and the animals are terrified of her. A lot of people wonder why the animals are running from Fluttershy, considering that she's just another guest in that huge party, and most of the guests either don't give a damn about animals or probably hate them. The animals have all the reason in the world to run. Meanwhile, the Wonderbolts are too occupied talking to other ponies for Rainbow Dash to get a word in edgewise. And Princess Celestia is too occupied for Twilight to get a word in edgewise. And Applejack hasn't made another sale in an entire hour. Yeah, each of their hopes get dashed one by one. But no matter what, they are determined to make this the best night ever! So Fluttershy decides that the best way to spend time with the creatures is to trap them. Okay. But the only thing she manages to catch with it is the gardener. Is it okay if I hate that guy? Because I do. Rainbow Dash butts into another pony and sends him careening into the air, but she manages to catch him, and the Wonderbolts don't notice either of those things. Prince Blueblood turns out to be an even bigger asshole. Pinkie Pie gets the band to play this episode's third song, the Pony Pokey. Like I said before, nothing could beat it at the gala. It's more of what happens in the song than how it sounds. It's there to show us that the main six's night keeps getting worse and worse. It's a mixture of funny and kinda sad, I'm gonna be totally honest. They seem to take it a little overboard with the main six getting their plans crushed one by one, at least from my point of view. Eventually, Fluttershy becomes scary. She's lost it, and she gets stuck in her own net. Pinkie Pie, never one to give up, tries to lighten the party once again. And she managed to catapult a cake that Applejack carried in. It's about to hit Blueblood, but he takes shelter behind Rarity. Oh, it is about to go down. It's funny because that's the stereotype people assumed Rarity would be. Rarity's outburst causes a statue to fall, and Rainbow tries to catch it. She succeeds, but it pushes her off balance, causing her to break down some columns. What? And Twilight comes in to find all of her friends disheveled.
It can't get any worse.
Wouldn't dream of doing anything else. Please don't hurt me. The, outburst causes everything to go to hell. Celestia whispers for them to run, and they do. And then there's the Cinderella reference. Spike has been at the donut bar this whole time, and he's a little grumpy. Spike learns that all of them had the worst gala ever, except Celestia, who says that it was the best gala ever. Okay. Apparently, the gala is always awful, and she invited Twilight and her friends to liven up the party. Okay. And it turns out that Spike was right. They should have just spent the whole evening together. Great, next time maybe he can ride in the vehicle. Remember when I said that the Cutie Chronicles was an episode that I could find almost nothing wrong with? This is an episode that, try as I might, I can't find anything wrong with it, beyond nitpicking. Yeah, I said they go overboard with making the main six miserable, but that's a personal complaint, and they had to fill out 22 minutes somehow. And they filled up those 22 minutes wonderfully. It's filled with humor, especially with Fluttershy's story. Why do ponies flipping out always make an episode funny? I'm actually impressed they tied 6 stories together without it getting confusing at all. I don't think I could say the same thing about this review. This episode really felt like a finale, and I really couldn't have asked anything more from it. I'll admit I don't like this episode quite as much as other people do, but I still really like it. Let me put it this way, it's not my favorite of Season 1, but I do like it enough to give it a gold. So, I've just reviewed every single episode of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic Season 1. How does it hold up? Well, first we'll see how it did. I'm going to quickly go through and give each episode a one-sentence review followed by a star rating. The maximum an episode can have is 5. And like I said, these are just one sentence to get a quick idea of what I thought of them. It's not going to be in-depth or anything like Paleo's Season 1 overview. And if you haven't subscribed to Paleo, I suggest you check them out right now. Something to keep in mind is that these star ratings are comparative. A 1-star episode here might be a 5-star episode in a lesser show, and if you've been watching my reviews, you probably know which rating each episode is going to get. Oh, and to repeat myself one more time, songs do not factor into my ratings. Are you ready? Because it's going to go really quickly. Friendship is Magic, Part 1. A good establishing episode, but not much more. 4 stars. Friendship is Magic, Part 2. Rushed with very awkward exposition, but an awesome climax. 2 stars. The Ticketmaster. Predictable and cliched, but nothing else outwardly wrong with it. 2 stars. Applebuck Season. Ponies getting hurt is funny. Most of the time. 4 stars. Griffon the Brush-Off. A pretty funny episode that would have been great if Gilda was a great character. 4 stars. Boast Busters. Wow, Rainbow, Applejack, and Rarity make Trixie seem like a saint. 1 star. Dragonshy. A good adventure with some great character development. 5 stars. Look Before You Sleep. Why are Rarity and Applejack acting like they're younger sisters, and why can't Twilight get a clue? 1 star. Bridle Gossip. Show, don't tell, especially when dealing with a moral like this. And don't have one character leave another for dead. 1 star. Swarm of the Century. So much chaos, and it is awesome. 5 stars. Winter Wrap-Up. The most average episode in the world. 3 stars. Call of the Cutie. Wow, that was a really mature moral, and they executed it extremely well. Too bad the show seems to have forgotten it. 5 stars. Fall Weather Friends. Twilight is really an ass in this episode. She almost takes the focus away from the great conflict between Rainbow and Applejack. 4 stars. Suited for Success. Even without the song, this episode is amazing, despite its unusual premise. 5 stars. Feeling Pinkie Keen. An otherwise hilarious episode destroyed by a horrendous moral. 1 star. Sonic Rainboom. The moment the show went from being good to being great. 5 stars. Stairmaster, a good conflict made almost intolerable by the CMC shouting like idiots, but otherwise, they were endearing. 4 stars. The Showstoppers, they cannot be this stupid, can they? 1 star. A dog and pony show. Wow, Rarity is actually an awesome character. 5 stars. Green isn't your color. I'm impressed. Fluttershy and Rarity reached the moral by themselves. Too bad they couldn't fit Twilight in correctly. 4 stars. Over a barrel. Despite the weirdness, this episode came off as enjoyable. If only Dave Polsky could write Pinkie correctly. 4 stars. A bird in the hoof. Cliched humor slathered in bad gross out and topped with an insulting ending. 1 star. Cutie Mark Chronicles. Perhaps one of the best episodes ever. 5 stars. All's well that ends well. Wow, they treat the new guy the same way they treat one of their best friends. Their affections are really petty. 1 star. Party of 1. Pinkie goes crazy and I love every second of it. 5 stars. The best night ever. An awesome ending to an awesome season. Final score. 87 out of a possible 130 stars. Not bad. Not bad at all. And if you're wondering, I'm going to double Season 3's score. I think I gave 4 stars the most. And that brings me to the season's main problem. We should probably get it out of the way before we talk about anything else. The problem was with Twilight. Yes, I know the show eventually moved past shoehorning her into every single episode, but that doesn't change what we had. To be honest though, she didn't do too much damage to the episodes that she didn't need to be in, docking at most 1 star in those episodes. And when I did dock a star because of Twilight being in the episode, it was more of her behavior. But the writers did realize that this was a problem, and they fixed it in Season 2. And that shows me that the writers are learning. Even in this season, I see that they've been learning from their failures. There were less failures in the second half of the season, and those that did fail mostly happened due to failed experiments rather than a lack of effort. I failed a total of 7 episodes, but as for episodes I didn't like, there were only 5 of them. At some point you'll get a top 10 worst, so I won't tell you which episodes they were. And the episodes that failed really weren't that bad. Trust me when I say I've seen some bad, horrendous episodes. You think screwing up a moral about faith is bad? Try screwing up a joke about suicide and see where that gets your episode. Each of the episodes that I failed did have saving graces. Feeling Pinkie keen was damn hilarious, Look Before You Sleep had some genuinely touching moments, and Boast Busters introduced an interesting character and an interesting creature. On an all-encompassing scale, these episodes would probably score like a 6 out of 10. You'll notice that I rarely gave 2 or 3 stars. Maybe I'm being a little too generous here, but the episodes in this show either seem to hit or miss, with very little in between. The characters are so well defined, it's easy to tell if they're out of character. The writing can be so good that it's easy to tell if a story is lacking, and there are some amazing jokes that it's easy to tell when there are flops, at least most of the time. Something about the show is that almost every single episode seems divisive, and I don't know why. I've seen people who love Boast Busters, and I've seen Party of 1 on a worst episode list. It's actually really bizarre. And this is Season 1. Just wait until we get to Season 3. That'll be fun. I get to piss a bunch of people off, no matter what I say. But we'll get there when we get there. As for Season 1, it got more enjoyable as it went on. I've noticed something about my reviews. They got longer as time went on. I thought it was maybe because I got better at this, but that would be giving me too much credit. No, the episodes got stronger as time went on. Even Dragonshy could have been summed up pretty easily. That's not bad, it's actually pretty good. The writers keep getting better and better. Let's see if they kept it up for Season 2. I'll see you then.